So good morning, everybody. My name is Nadine Ferris. I'm the Executive Director for the Irish Global Health Network, and we are very proud to host the ESTHER Ireland programme. So you're all extremely welcome this morning to our 8th Partnership Forum, the 8th one. Who else has been here since the beginning? Who else has been here at the first one? Wow. Amazing, eh? A few diehards. First, second one. Say we started coming on. Caragh, probably the second one. Joe, wonderful. Yeah, I can't believe it's the 8th Partnership Forum. Amazing how time flies when you're having a lot of fun, as we have been. And just to let you all know that this event is being live streamed over there, and it means that people who can't be up here, can't travel today, can join us on YouTube. So good morning, anyone who's joining us now or who's joining us later. We find with these meetings that a lot of people actually watch recordings back. So it's a great way to capture the knowledge. And thank you to RCSI for hosting us again in the space. We're very grateful. The agenda for today, you can see it on the wall. We're being sustainable, not printing out paper that's unnecessary. But we have a really fantastic day ahead for you today. We're going to start with, as Christian said, by hearing some really interesting words of wisdom from Christian. Really excited to hear that, and his presentation is called Power in Partnerships, something we're very interested in. Then we're absolutely delighted to be having a panel discussion that's going to be facilitated by Carol, that's going to feature our Malawi friends to really hear about the perspective of the Southern partner, and also, very excitingly today, we're going to be presented with a very creative project which is called One Head Does Not Lift a Roof. It's depicted in scripture and in this beautiful, what's already here on the side, the wooden carvings. Then we're going to have a session on localization, which again is just about localization, the different perspectives. Each session is designed to be interactive, to hear from us. It's a learning opportunity for all of us. So hopefully that's everybody can participate and learn as much as they can. We'll have a lunch break, which are always in these meetings, I think, even more important sometimes than what's happening on the agenda, in that you get to meet people and network and incredible things happen. So we'll have lunch, and then we'll come back for a networking session that's going to be facilitated by Thora and Kira. We're going to have a communications workshop, because communicating the amazing work that everybody is doing is really important. So we'll learn a little bit more about communication from Caragh. Then we'll hear a little bit more from David around the evaluation that was carried out, and thank you for those of you who participated in that last year for ESTHER, the ESTHER programme as a whole. And then we're going to announce the accredited partners, new accreditation partners this year. So we have quite a full agenda, lots of space in there as well. And just to say, I think today is really a day of learning. That's what it is. It's a day of expanding our thinking. It's a day of creativity. It's a day of hopefully new ideas, new connections, and a day for sharing. So please, we invite you to participate. We invite you to ask the question that you might be thinking, oh, I should know that. Ask the question, because if you don't know it, somebody else in the room doesn't know it. You'll be helping us all. So particular welcome to our friends from Malawi and our friends from Uganda. We're privileged to have you with us this morning. You're welcome. David, maybe you could hand over to you to say a few words.
Thanks, Nadine. Good morning, everyone, and everyone online, or who's watching. It's great to be here again, our 8th Partnership Forum. Quite proud to be that. Just to add a few things by way of introduction, I find these events really nice for getting together and networking, learning from each other. And each year we think of like what might be kind of a good topic or what's relevant at the current time, and we come up with the theme for today of global networking for equitable partnerships. And of course, partnerships and partnership is at the core of what we do in our work in the ESTHER program. But it's also the core of everything in development. It's in the Sustainable Development Goals. You see it at the core of Ireland's international development policy, a better world. But I think we look back over the last period of a few years that you could look at the whole approach to global partnership and say that it's under threat. There's a lot of shift away from multilateral approaches to unilateral. So countries, in the face of a lot of global threats, looking to protect themselves, the self-interest. In your language, like in the UK, development in the national interest, or on the other side of the waters, America first. You know, these kind of things we hear. And in Europe, we're very, very much taken up with the conflict in Ukraine. That's very preoccupying. And undoubtedly that's taking our focus away from other parts of the world. And how much do we hear about what's going on in Africa? And I was in Ethiopia last week, and I was reminded that during the civil war in Tigray, population of 9 million people, 500,000 civilians died. Did you all know that? And where is that in our media? What's our response to that? And have we lost some of that kind of global attention? And also, if we look back to the COVID pandemic, there was another example. We said, we're all in this together. And then when it came to implementing, well, were we really all in it together? And was it a level playing field when the vaccines came out? Did everyone get equal access? So I think we see in global partnership, there's a lot of imbalance. Well, things aren't right about what we call partnership. So it's good to reflect on that. There's been a lot of discussion today about the idea of decolonization, you know, undoing the whole colonization approach. So we thought for this partnership forum, it'd be good to reflect on some of these ideas and think for ourselves as to what partnership looks like for us. And it's great to have people from some other countries, Uganda and Malawi, I think, to help us look at our partnerships to see how they are today, and how can we, as we continue our work, develop more equitable partnerships. And I was always going to say, and then I have another thought, and it's really just, I think when we get together, it's also a chance to think about what we've been doing over years, and to celebrate the work in partnerships, and to see how they work and the good things. And I have good reason the last couple of weeks to feel very positive about partnerships. And one example, 2 weeks ago, the HSE renewed its partnership with RCPI, Royal College of Physicians in Ireland, which worked together in an initiative called the Equals Initiative with Zambia. And we had someone over from Zambia to talk about what had been achieved there. And one of the key results of things that resulted from the collaboration was the progress they made with developing the Zambian College of Medicine and Surgery. And now they have over 100 graduates a year. And that's nearly 10 years on from the start of the collaboration. And so there was a lesson for me on that the partnerships, the long-term nature of the partnerships you engage in, over time produces results, and they take time. And that was just very encouraging to see that. Another example was hearing back from Cora, our colleague Cora, who was in Mozambique 2 weeks ago. And 6 years ago, we had a training program with hospitals in improving quality of care. And each hospital had one team trained, one project in one part of the hospital. Tora visited a hospital, and we've had very little engagement with the hospital over the years, to see now that they have continued that work and expanded to every part of the hospital. They're doing projects and they're improving. And to see the impact, that's another lesson, the impact that our partnership work can have, that when we work and build capacity, that it can be sustainable. And then the third thing is there's always the opportunities. I was in Ethiopia last week, and I see new partnerships, opportunities, new partnerships to develop. One in the area of elimination of cervical cancer, a big public health issue, both in Ethiopia, but also in Ireland. An opportunity to develop a collaboration with Tigray, where the conflict has been. And there's a team in Cork who are ready to collaborate there. And these opportunities develop new links that can undoubtedly help to improve health situation in different countries. So there, just with those few thoughts, just look forward to the day, and hand back to Nadine.
Thanks, David. So just on housekeeping, I just forgot to mention that there are toilets. Caragh, you might help me. They're out where the elevators are, so you go back towards where the elevators are, and then around the back of the elevators. And if you need any help, just ask one of us. And if there is, in the event of a fire, please take the stairs. Who else will come into the room? Can you just let everybody know who you are and where you're from?
I'm Sanakesh. I am the project coordinator for global health at Children's Hospital.
In the news these days, quite a lot. You're welcome. Okay, Christian, we are really excited to hear from you. Christian serves as the Executive Director for the Uganda National Academy of Science, the UNAS. Previously, Christian held positions with relevance to global health partnerships while working with the US National Academies of Science, Engineering and Medicine Africa Program, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the Sudan-Uganda Program of the Lutheran World Federation. And Christian is going to talk to us today about something that's so important, something that we know about from the principles of ESTHER partnerships, and we know from our experience, which is about power in partnerships. So Christian, what do we know, what do we not know, what do we need to do better? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Nadine and colleagues. I'm so happy to be here with you this morning and to see my friends from Malawi. Little did they know that I could say Mulibwanji. There's something I picked up there in Malawi. Mulibwanji. Wonderful. And I've been to Mzuzu and Livingstonia and Lilongwe and Blantyre and my favorite Mangochi. So there we go. So I feel right at home here. Ugandans or no Ugandans. I'm very happy to be here. And so with as far as the wisdom comes, I'll say that I like the framing of this event from what Nadine said as a learning opportunity. So I'm learning along with everyone else in this field. So I don't pretend to have all the answers. What you'll hear from me are just a few provocations and a sharing of some experiences that I've had. And so I'll say up front that I am a recovering funder. I used to be a funder based in Washington, D.C., and I've repented my evil ways. Found my way back to things that matter. So I have those perspectives as well. And it's very easy to tell when a funder only uses the word partnership, loosely. It's not really partnership, because who holds that funder accountable? I've never really known. For some of them, the government ones, they say their governments hold them accountable. But the foundations, who holds those foundations accountable? So they can come and do so much havoc in the name of partnership, and no one will hold them accountable. So it seems to me that therein lies this problem of power, is in the accountability mechanism. Right? There is the asymmetry with these foundations, even with our bilateral partners, USAID, DFID, and so on, is that they are never held accountable, and they will always move on and do their own things. But let me take a step back to our context right now. I liked COVID for one thing. It showed us that we did not have friends. It also showed us that we had some friends. The number of people who ran away from our context, our African context, say the whole continent is going to die. So run away, go away. That's what a partner does, right? As I'm dying is when you should flee, right? Because otherwise I may infect you with the death, right? That is the implication. So, now trying for people to come back, I've always said there is a lot of power in saying no. And we were in Geneva in May, and somebody asked, but how do you say no? And my response was very clear. You just do it. You say no, because the integrity is not for sale, right? So this idea of we will come in when it's convenient for us and run away when we think you're going to perish, that can't work anymore in this context right now. And I think it's so great with COVID again. Some people say, Christian, why are you finding anything positive in COVID? It's because it unmasks all those things that, these kinds of dynamics, and the pretense, really, is what I call it. The pretense of caring. The pretense of we are standing together, when in actuality, we are not standing together, right? So that's point number one. And so, the 1960s mentality that in some of our countries, there is no capacity That one has come to an end. Look at the professors and practitioners in this room. It's very good to see people who look like me as experts and being brought here as experts, to learn together. That mentality of we will tell you what is right has also come to an end. Unfortunately, some of our so-called partners still have that mentality. And my favorite time is when we stand there, they say all the things they need to say, and then very politely say, what you're suggesting will not work here. And, it's a great, David talks about Ethiopia. I love Ethiopia because you cannot go there and force Ethiopians to do something that isn't in their blood. That is one place where I learned how to be a proud African. And, the executive director of the Ethiopian Academy of Sciences told me, Christian, here in Ethiopia, if someone will say, I would rather protect my land than let you dictate what I do in my country. I would rather stay poor than let you dictate what I do. And I think that is a very healthy mentality to have. Some people have heard them say, stubbornness was invented in Ethiopia. But there's a reason for it. Because it gives you a sense of self-worth, right? So when we talk about these power imbalances, what are we really talking about? It is a dehumanization, right? So when you talk about partnership, if at the center of that partnership isn't a program in humanization, it is not a partnership. In fact, it is masquerading as one, and it is a project in dehumanization. We need to face that one very clearly right now. All right. What else are we thinking about here? We need to problematize, as I've already started, problematizing the very notion of partnership. Is it simply a legal thing? We sign on, we sign, now we are partners, which means at any point we can get divorced, right? Anytime we can walk away. As I talked earlier, the minute I start sensing death, I'll run away from you. That really does not get to the bottom of what we're trying to do. Global health challenges will be here forever for all of us. And so, as we talk about being in it together, we saw how easily we could all come to a standstill. And then guess what? The Africans didn't die as they were expected to. We didn't all perish. In fact, we contributed to the knowledge base in significant ways. We contributed to new discoveries, genome sequencing. Even though South Africa was locked out of the world for a while and pushed back, we contributed to the knowledge base. We contributed to innovations right now that are helping the world. And so there was a kind of turning things on their head, right? This wasn't the AIDS time where all Africa is perishing. No, because yesterday I told David and Caragh that in my village, people said, please send the money, but don't come to the village for Christmas. Keep your COVID there. And people in my village didn't die. And some people say, well, that's because they were not testing, they were not doing, and I say, no. People in my village know what it means to die, what it means to be sick and to die. And if people are dying in large numbers, they will sound the alarm very quickly. What is that leading me to? That knowledge systems and the integration of these knowledge systems has to be at the heart of anything called a partnership. Because knowledge isn't only generated outside Africa. In fact, there are some derogatory things people say. If there is something generated, developed in Africa or Asia or Latin America, the so-called global South, that is reverse innovation. So it is as if there is a directionality to what? To knowledge, which is not correct. Because we have our own, and as much as if we are going to partner, we have to give each other meaning, right? Give each other value. And that also comes to play with those knowledge systems getting integrated. All right. What else? With the money. Money is always an issue. Where is the money coming from? I mean, I fundraise all the time. Colleagues here fundraise all the time. And then you hear that, I'm in meetings where you say, this is a lot of money for you people. You will will be able to do a lot with this money we give you. And most times I sit there and look and say, so what's the implication? That the money that wouldn't work for you, you would never ever, I say to my American colleagues, you would never ever start a project with this money. Yet you are shoving it down my throat and have a long list of things I'm supposed to do with that money. That is a power imbalance in and of itself. So then, when the arrogant statements are made about so much can be done with very little in our context, there is a reason why we keep quiet. Because, again, that is a derogatory way of looking at what we do and how we do it. It's as if your value is more valuable than my value. And that is not a partnership, right? If we are to lift each other up and have this kind of programs in humanization, we have to change that kind of money notion, because it's not only money that makes a partnership, right? And again, I've learned many lessons from the Ethiopians. For some reason, every time they kick out a funder, the funder comes back with more money. I don't know how it works out there. We need to figure out the Ethiopian genius there. And whoever brings that money goes with the Ethiopian priorities. I have never seen it with Ethiopians changing their plan because some funder, in fact, as a funder, I was kicked out of Ethiopia and said, well, take your project elsewhere. We don't need it. And sure enough, when I reported to my bosses in Washington, they said, find out the Ethiopian priority, because this money must go. It can't stay here. And there we go. That was great magic for us. Okay, here we go. SDG 17, the Partnership Sustainable Development Goal, which is a hangover from the Millennium Development Goals. MDG 8 was on partnership. Not much got done on it. SDG 17, you probably will have the same fate unless there is this kind of radical working together that recognizes these power asymmetries, information asymmetries, money asymmetries, and the dehumanization that we've been engaged in. And I say we, because I'm sure I have been part of a dehumanizing project. I've been part of shoving things down people's throats. I remember being very young, working at Gavi, and being able to talk to any minister of health I wanted to speak with at a moment's notice, and saying, oh, these are the things you're going to do, without ever listening. So, this is why I say we are reforming bit by bit and becoming more human to each other. And so that is the invitation that I see in that Sustainable Development Goal 17. Okay, what are our implications here? I see two very quick ones. First, as I've said, in this language we use. For me, from the time I've spent with African Americans, there is a true north, right? Follow the North Star, you will get to freedom. So what is this language we talk about, the global north and the global south? There is a direction there, isn't there? So the global south, Kachini, we are down. The global north, we are looking up to freedom. There is something wrong with that notion. And in fact, I have stopped using it whenever I write. The global north, global south. What else? Low and middle income countries. That is derogatory. Why? Because all the values is in money. Right? When I lived with my grandparents in the village, I was very happy. I didn't know I was poor until I left the village and someone told me I was poor. You see? That is money. Money came into play very quickly. You are poor because you don't have euros and dollars. There you go. Yet, when I cast back and look at the village mates where I come from, my kin, and see their lifestyle now, a highly vegan lifestyle, a highly active one, and the things that make them happy. For me, I say, why do I invite so much stress into my life when there's a very rich way of living that my ancestors have given me? Now, I'm not trying to say we don't live in a globalized world. We do. But again, I'm going back to that knowledge. I'm starting from a base of an asset base, right? funds of knowledge, that we have access, local resources available to us to learn. We don't need to go too far away from that. And it turns things upside down because most of our so-called partnerships start from a deficit perspective, right? Let me explain what I mean. When you hear people talk about capacity building, I remember a Norwegian being very irritated with me when I say, we're building the capacity of African scientists in all these 23 countries. And he said, to do what? Capacity to do what? Okay? It took me 12 years to understand that irritation. That in that thing of capacity building, there is an implication that it is one direction, right? That, we are the ones who know. We are going to build the capacity of those Africans, those Asians, those Latin Americans who know nothing, right? They need their capacity built. Yet in that very process of capacity building, there is an opportunity for those who are doing the so-called capacity building to build their capacity to be better partners, right? To build your capacity to be better human beings. To build better capacity to show the oneness and togetherness that will bring together this sustainable development goal number 17. And we'll end on this one thing here. For me, it comes down to humility and being able to walk through other people's lives without disrupting them and forcing them to look like yours. That takes a level of discipline that I've seen in very few of my partners. And here is where I give you an example. One of my favorite, what I'll call the only partner we have, follows our priority. Follows what we say, these are our needs. This is the way we would like to reach our goals. And in fact, spends a lot of time saying, how can I uplift you so that you solve the problems that you see? How can I be a better funder to you? That one, again, is very rare. That you find these partners, the ones with all the capacity, asking, what do you need? How can I be helpful? How can I not get in the way? Okay? So for me, those are subtle things that mean so much. And I'll say, as we problematize partnerships, we also need to problematize whiteness as well, right? And this whole issue that where comes knowledge, where comes wisdom, there is the whiteness attached to it. I'm not only talking about skin color, I'm talking about a mentality, okay? There is a partner we had, and I say, we were great with the German talking with us. And then all of a sudden, we had an African in that position who was the worst program officer we've ever worked with. We had to change our tune. And I say to my colleagues, make sure that you read down on what this fellow has written and repeat it to him. That's all he wants to hear. He doesn't want to hear anything else. And it worked very well, right? How many times do we clap? And we wait for you to leave our country so we can get back to work, right? There are so many times we do that without our partners realizing what we are doing. Because, this is what you have to do. You have to play the game, waste a bit of time and resources, and they'll be on their merry way, and you continue with work. But that, again, undermines this whole notion of partnership. So, I think you'll hear from me again at the end of the day, but those are just my opening thoughts. And grateful for any questions and remarks, but we are together learning.
Thank you, Christian. Wow, what a start. What a start. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for challenging. Would you like some water?
No, I'm good now for now.
Okay. And thanks for challenging us. I think that objective is met, challenge. Who here feels already that that's really challenging some of the things that you were thinking or the way that you've been thinking about partnerships? Who here feels challenged? Good. Good to be challenged. Can you feel the tension sometimes with this? A bit of tension. It's like, oh, but how do I do the right thing? How do I know? How do I do the right thing? And Christian, you said about global south, global north, low middle income countries. You know, such a powerful case. What should we? How should we speak? What should we say? And it's welcome for everybody to come in on this. You know, this is a learning for all of us. I love what you said, Christian. You don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But together, maybe we have more. What do you think, Christian?
Well, you know, in my current evolution right now is in think about it as, you know, one of our colleagues, Judy Lasker, in the Advocates for Global Health Partnership, she started using these words, the global majority and global minority. Right. And the global majority kind of maps onto what's now known as the global south. And the global minority, what's now known as the global north. I'm very comfortable with that.
I mean, what do others think of that? We'd love to hear from you. I mean, this is a conversation. What do you think? Yes, Lucia, and then
sorry.
That's okay. You go ahead, Lucia.
I've been always, I agree with you on low middle, and I'm coming from the south as well,
Yeah.
from southern Italy, and there is always the discussions. I think it doesn't make any sense to put a label where we are coming from. We're just partners. You are my partner, and I'm your partner. It doesn't matter where we are coming from. We are just trying together to reach an objective. So I would take out the label of south, or as far as you have a common objective to reach together. So we're just partners. That's my personal.
Good view. Yes.
I think I would agree. All I was going to say is, why can't we talk about continents, Africa, Europe, whatever, and then if we want to speak about countries, we talk about Ireland, Uganda, Malawi. We don't need these adjectives going with them. They're countries, wherever they are. But I just find that this, you know, Africa's always often portrayed as just one country, right? So it's made up of 30-something, 50-something, I don't remember that, but it's this.
Yeah, it works. Christian.
Yes, well, one thing here is it's very easy to say, let us see ourselves as human beings, one human, and I like that idea. But the reality is that we bring something to a partnership. And it could be very clear that the partnership is skewed one way or another, and you need to know that. You could be that on the one side, you are bringing with you so many degrees, or so many country experiences. And the notion here is that you don't have to dictate, you do not have to get anything out of it per se, but in just the mere interaction, the kind of humble, respectful interaction brings about a lot of value in itself. But with that recognition that you bring a lot to a situation. I go to places and I know there's certain baggage I'm bringing to that, let's call it a collaboration or partnership. And there are also there's certain positives I'm bringing. And that I do not need to walk away with anything material added to me. It's just, that's the interaction. And that there's a lot of meaning in how I interact with another human being.
And Christian, as partners, there's a lot of partnerships in the room, people who are working in all sorts of partnerships. What are the questions that we should be asking ourselves? Because I hear from you, it's like sometimes awareness is important. That's what you're saying, awareness of who I am, what I bring, what the situation is, where is the power. What kind of questions can we ask so that we become more aware of where power is imbalanced?
Well, the questions are there, like the ones you've asked. What am I bringing? Am I using certain, glasses to look at the situation? There is also a lot in not bringing any question, in listening and observing. Yogi Bear said you can see a lot by looking. You can see a lot by looking. Same way with these partnerships, you can hear and see a lot by listening. And many times, unfortunately, there's a lot of arrogance. And it is on any side where there's very little listening going on. Real listening and using every moment in an interaction as a potential moment of, again, this thing of humanizing at that moment. There are so many moments we miss because we are preoccupied with the demons in our minds. God knows I have many of those. But you know, when you sit and really pay attention and you are present, you know, to whoever it is that's your partner, be it an organization, be it the people, at the end of the day, it's the people in that entity. There is a lot of value there. And there's a lot that people will trust you when you listen and when you take their perspectives seriously and use them even when they are uncomfortable. Because the people, they are the experts of their lives. They are the experts of their context. So if you're not going to trust them when they say, what you're bringing won't work here, then what are you doing? You know, so that to be trustworthy, you must give that trust.
I love that. People are the experts of their lives. So clear. Yes, we'd love to hear from you. Our friend from Malawi there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Can you give us your name again?
Sorry?
Yes, please. What's your name again?
Balwani.
Yes, Balwani.
Yeah, thank you so much for your very enthusiastic presentation and it's thought-provoking. I'd like to find the discussion that is underway here. But then I think there was a question that was posed to you, and then in terms of how comfortable would you be trying to address a global south versus global north? And you comfortably mentioned of global minority versus global majority. So again, just to trigger discussion, what criteria are you using to classify one part as global minority versus global majority? Is it population, or is it economy again? And how different they be from low income versus medium population? So I just want to hear you from you in terms of the criteria that you use to make you comfortable that you can say this is a global minority versus global majority. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, the foundation of my comfort really is just in turning the north-south upside down. That's the basis of it all. But on a more serious term is that when you look at the rush for natural resources, where is everyone going? For me, that's where the global majority lies. The future is in our countries. In Malawi, in Uganda, I'm telling you. Because look at all these companies that are setting up in our country. When we ourselves are not investing in our country, before we know it, we will have so many new visitors who never leave because of what's present in our environment. So that's the criteria. The one other criterion I use is that rush. And I think I'll add to it one point with the partnerships that I didn't mention is that when I take the African case, there are many times we have undermined each other. There are many times, let's take country by country, where Uganda can undermine Malawi, or DRC, or Kenya, and there's nothing more. Our bilateral partners love it so much that we undermine each other. They love it, because at the end of the day, power stays with them, right? And we have always talked about Pan-Africa and blah. And so right now, part of the work I'm doing is engaging in intra-African partnerships and what it really takes for us to sort our house out and not always run to Italy, Ireland, UK, US, as our partner. How about we partner with each other?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Iso from Malawi again. And I see that on this issue of global partnership to be successful, there's you have more concentrating on the mind change that we have, and how easy or how difficult is it to change that mindset which we already planted far away, very in ancient days. The mindset was already there, and at this time, how difficult or how easy could that be changed? Thank you so much.
Well, mindset, what I'll say, remember that story I told you of not knowing that I was poor until I was told so.
Yes.
It's the same thing. We didn't know we were illiterate until we were told. Right? How about all those years before? And I think those years outnumber the years that we've been colonized in our minds. Right? And so it's step by step. It starts step by step. I'll give you a quick example from my entities that when we were designing our encoder, there was a lot of drive for using certain materials, being LED, gold or platinum, and we had to think about it more and say, what materials are going to make sense for our context? What's available here? What actually will be a good African building that then we don't need things like air conditioning or that kind of thing, things that will be easy to maintain. There is an architect in Burkina Faso who has made it his life's work to build African structures. And it's amazing how many prizes he's won. The irony of it is all his prizes have been in Europe for African design, but he has used what's been locally available to make those buildings relevant. For me, that kind of artifact is an example of practices that help us love ourselves more and not always try to think that we have a deficit of some sort. Because it is from that mentality of you have a deficit. Once you internalize it, it's from that mentality where now things go wrong, where you look up, knowing very well that what you're being told to do is not correct for your context. And that hard work there is another artifact that you brought here. For me, I'm very proud to see that, even before you talk about it, because that is integrating, again, certain knowledge systems of ours. Okay? Yeah. So step by step it starts. There's a lot to undo. So there's a lot of work left over for this in partnership, so much. And as I'm in the framing of this event, there is so much to learn and unlearn. And there is even more to learn after that. And so what I hope is to hand that over to my children, and hopefully they will learn more and faster and help themselves.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah. And I love your question about mindset as well. And for me, it's like mindset and beliefs. And I think it starts at the level of each of us. It's like, what are you believing in any particular situation? What would you be believing if you're sitting in a meeting thinking that what you are trying to share is the right approach? What would you have to be believing to follow through on that? And the same way, if you're sitting there clapping for something that you think is absolutely not going to work, what would you be believing? What would you be believing in that moment that would perpetuate that? So I think it's like really starting at the level of asking yourself, and I know with the team, with Caragh and Maisie, with the team, we've been starting to look at, how do you reflect on yourself, on your own beliefs, in any particular moment? What would you be believing? Awareness. First step, awareness. David?
Yeah, a lot of what
You speak up as well for everything.
a lot of what you've talked about with the power imbalance is the unidirectional nature of north-south capacity building from one to the other. And it would seem to me that one way to come at this is to think of it as bi-directional. And we're not very bi-directional. A lot of our partnerships are mainly focused on the north-south axis. And last 2 weeks ago, we were renewing the agreement with Zambia, between our work with Zambia. And the Chief Executive Officer of the Health Service said, we can learn so much. When you heard the presentation, we can learn so much. But we're not doing that enough. And I think if we approach a partnership, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, that So we go in as equals. We have problems and needs. You might have problems and needs. You have knowledge. We have knowledge. We can share your knowledge. If we respect your knowledge, well, we should be inviting you to share that knowledge. So what would that look like in practice if our health service partners with you, and we want that bi-directional, and say we respect your local knowledge, we value that, we'd like to learn from that. How do we do that?
Well, I think that the team here is already doing it. I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but the way this event was organized and how the dates were picked, from just the very beginning, it is a different way of approaching meetings. Because many times you get invitations and they sound like commands, more than invitation. So I think they're starting from that very level, or even the very notion of, are we getting into, what kind of partnership are we getting? Let us talk together about how the parameters, which values are we leading with? Because what I hold strongly here is that if you start with the values and then build a structure on the values, it has an ability to last longer and again recreate this meaning for whoever is involved in the partnership. So I think it starts there. Your values. Do you walk your talk? Are you respectful from the get-go? Are you inhabiting that space of, oh yeah, there's a lot to learn? One time I remember going to Alabama and saying to myself, if I had known the sewage system in Alabama, I would have done my MPH project on Alabama, because it was worse than Uganda. It was horrible over there. Oh, even New Orleans, I mean, you see it and you say, no wonder Tulane University has a great MPH program. Because look at all these pipes. So for me, I say, starting there, what are we getting into? What are we seeing? And that acknowledgement that, yes, there is a lot of beauty and horribleness on all sides. Yeah.
Yeah, very clear, Christian. It's like, do you walk the talk? Are you respectful? Are you in a learning frame? Yeah, simple questions. Yes, Aisha, is that right?
Yeah. I have a question. Other than respect, what are key values that are important?
Can you say it louder?
Other than respect, what are other key values that are really important to kind of angle in every approach to a partnership?
I said, was there a question in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other values,
Yes.
other than respect
Perfect.
for partnership. I think we spend a lot of time talking about humility.
Yes.
Spend a lot of time talking about accountability. As a recovery fund, I'll tell you how much we used to talk about mutual accountability at Gavi and did none of it. There was no mutual accountability. It was all, yes, Gavi 72 countries, please report to us. We need, that is our mutual accountability. So I think the real accountability comes there where you say, you are not doing certain things right, and say, okay, how do we improve to serve you better? Because at the end of the day, a place like Gavi is set up for us. I mean, it's not a favor to us. It was set up for us. So if we are not taking charge and say, there are some practices that you're not doing well, and for the entity to take that feedback seriously, then there's something wrong. So that accountability piece, I think for me, that's where the rubber really hits the road. And there's a thing where you see in these big institutions that gobble people up, some of the best people in those entities, the ones that listen, the ones that take your feedback and include it in their next plans, they leave. Because the institutional framework isn't there to support what they're doing. They leave, they go elsewhere, and that is a tragedy for us. So I think I'll add accountability to that mix of values.
Thank you, Aisha. Good question. Eric.
Thanks very much. I think,
Can you hear Eric at the back?
Sorry, I speak very softly.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. And I think, starting from the mindset is obviously, that's the key, getting the mindset right. And I think in your last answer there, you're starting to move on to okay, what is the governance, what is the setup that follows? So do you have any examples from your experience of a really good governance setup of a partnership that allows for the input of both partners?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I'll give you one example right now and another later. The first one is what we engaged in with David, our advocacy for global health partnership. We are building the governance framework. And it's so difficult, partly because we started with the values. And I see a lot of promise in what we're doing. And you know, the decisions are made by a leadership circle where people are given equal time to speak, and where sometimes we are so uncomfortable in the meetings, you can cut the tension with a knife. But we still engage in the discomfort to make the decisions we make. And once we take the time to go through the discomfort, what we decide, everyone's on board. And I found that taking that time really helps people come along, as frustrating as it can be in the meantime, and as frustrating as it can be when you're sitting there and going, you are wrong. What you're saying is totally off, but you still have to listen and then pick out that gem in those thoughts. So that is one. The other one that I have seen is in our governance, in our network of science academies, is that even there, regardless of size of the science academy, there is equal say, and again, a lot of time spent in decision making to make sure that everyone is on board. And very few things are voted on because of the kind of lingering frustrations that come with the vote. And other than that, look, the partnerships have been engaged in have typically been lopsided. And they've been lopsided, and it's just been so painful to see the results. Again, they gobble people up, and they rarely meet the stated intention. Because again, people who have their own agendas. So that's why I say there's a lot of work left to do with the partnership.
The second time I heard you mention discomfort, I heard it early on, and it's almost like if it's all very comfortable, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So looking for the discomfort, to have to sit in conversations where it's uncomfortable, and then to have to stay and not run away, like with a divorce, to stay in the discomfort and work it through. It's like a temple bell. Anybody else like to come in? I mean, everybody here is in this. We're all in this together. All of us are in these conversations daily, in these partnerships, in these interactions. What have you seen from your experience that could be useful to us in this discussion? Or what experiences have you seen where you've really seen terribly wrong, lopsided discussions or partnerships? What can we learn? The wisdom is here in this room.
How
Yes.
do you see, sorry.
Sorry, Lucia, there was just behind
Just
you one
go
hand.
ahead,
Yeah, go ahead. Where are you? Yeah, go ahead. Moses.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's one of the exciting meeting I've attended. I'll begin with mindset. I think in Malawi, there's a saying where they say you don't burn a hand that fits you. Right? So sometimes as partners, if we want partners to maybe to have more collaborative ideas, sometimes maybe the funders should give freedom to the other party where they are able to see what can work well in their countries. Because most of the times, like in Malawi or any other African countries, we have good ideas on how we can implement that project. But now the problem is, comes in when the funders or the other partner will just dictate. But that comes because sometimes the funders don't give much attention or give time to the other party to express what can work well in their countries. So I think in this meeting, it's a learning process whereby even the funders themselves, they should realize that Africa Africa have also have good ideas on how some of the projects can be implemented. So we just have to be more engaged, to engage each other in a free environment where African countries can also tell what they really need. And then in so doing, I think there will be less imbalance in terms of partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Lucia and then Carol.
I've been implementing a lot of projects. I was wondering what is the role of money in partnerships. I've been asking myself a lot of times why we always give money and our partners do not co-fund the activities. Will that be a way of being more equal also on reaching a common goal where with your richness in knowledge, resources, whatever you are saying, I think I don't see right now that we provide 100% of funding. So I wonder, is money there where we can also add to this discussion? We didn't put it as a value, but definitely we cannot implement activities if we do not have funding. So I would love to hear from you. How do you see the money question since your countries have a lot of resources?
Mm-hmm. Well, the money question, I'll tell you, as I said earlier, I spend a lot of time fundraising for programs, but every time I write a report, I include for the funder all the other things they do not see, and I monetize those things for them. I just irritated my funder, the Hewlett Foundation, because I added a column, and he saw that what we had put in was a lot more than what the foundation had given us. And I think on the side, there is a misperception on those who provide money that we haven't put up any money, because they think, well, we've transferred X amount of money. They don't know what happens on the other side. They don't know, sometimes there is an opportunity cost in engaging in your program. Sometimes I underpay people that are so well qualified, but are doing that work because they care, And so if I quantify the difference, it comes up to some monetary value. And I love speaking in a language that funders talk. They talk numbers. So I love showing them the numbers up front. And as much as it irritates them, it gives them you get that sense that the arrogance has started to go down a little bit when you quantify all the other things you do. And right now, for us, we've stopped accepting so-called small grants because it takes so much it's so much work to even report on a 10,000 euro grant. It's so much work to the point that if you are going to ask me to give you 50 pages so that I'll say no, my staff time is a lot more than that. But now I have a partner who will give that money, and it is a half-a-page report which we can write in a half an hour, have a conversation for 45 minutes or so, and it's done. I like that very much because the experience has been that little money has so much headache attached to it. Little money has a lot of nickeling and diming. Every time we receive such a huge grant, the report somehow seems to go more smoothly. I don't know why that is. I just think maybe it's a human thing that we feel like we need to really control that little that we've given. So, yeah, that is money for you, and I'll tell you, it's a great invention for those who wanted to control us. That money thing, wonderful invention.
Money, power, control. Carol.
Well, a few things. You've thrown me off my train of thought there. Initially, I was talking to Moses. One of the problems we've had in Malawi, and it's not our partners' problem, we were organising a training for surgeons last year, and we had agreed our partners had suggested who they felt needed the training, so it was all organised. But then the DHOs in various areas started to say, right, certain people have to attend. And what we had found the year before was, we had people coming to surgery, and we knew they had no interest in surgery. They never did surgery when we weren't there. So we had said, the next time we do it, we only want people who are interested. We don't care what their titles are, what we just want people who are really interested. But we were overruled. And it wasn't just us, it was our partners. It was the people on the ground who were saying it, but they had to, for political reasons, we had to, keep them happy. Have you any advice on that? The other thing is, I did speak to Caragh about the ESTHER form and filling it in, and I think I think what you said is very true. So, but it's this political, it's the partners are in agreement about what's needed and what we do, but we're kind of overruled.
I'll tell you what, that I think in any country, politics will always try to overrule good practice, good action, no matter what. Even, let's take the US government's focus now on localization. How horrible is that program? But anyway, the politicians have been pushing it, in all the countries. I've run into that problem, but I will say now, this is the positionality statement. I am in a very privileged position. As a National Academy of Sciences, it's very difficult, even for the politicians to touch the entity, because from its very inception, it was independent. I'll give you an example. In 2014, when we worked on tobacco control, right? Tobacco control science has been around for a while, but our government, there was no agreement for the legislation to control tobacco in Uganda, and so they brought it to the academy. And we brought, certain people from different across the continent for a meeting. Our Ministry of Health wanted to overrule the meeting. And then the ministry looked and looked and looked for ways to stop the meeting, but could not. Until finally, Director General of Health Services, called the chair of the committee, him well, Francis Omaso, and said, Francis, I need you to cancel this meeting. And he said, why? Well, because this is a Ministry of Health thing. Why is the academy involved? And Francis said, well, I can't cancel it. This is an academic program going on. This is how people were selected. It is an independent process. But I understand that is a privileged space that we're in. Same thing with all sorts of contentious issues that come our way. We stand on that independence. And I think over the years, even politicians have come to respect that these are very stubborn people. And they do not have a government subvention. So again, money, they can't control us by switching off the tap to something to the consolidated fund. But I know friends in NGOs who suffer so much dealing with our politicians. And I think, again, it is a tragedy that it's a thing we need to solve for ourselves. And that's why I talked earlier about the intra-African partnerships. We need to deal with our horribleness. And part of it is that the political legacy of obstruction. And we all know it, we all see it, where you have to have the president's cousin in there or something, who is a total waste of time and space, but you have to deal with them. I see it all the time. And so that's my long-winded way of saying, I know the problem, and when you can stand on your feet and say no, sometimes they'll back off, but other times they will definitely undermine what you're trying to do.
Dealing with the horribleness. Love that. David, very quickly.
Yeah, I just recall something that Christian will remember from the meeting in Geneva last year, the side event, and the question was asked, how do you handle disagreements when you disagree with your partner? Sometimes it's government. And there was a very helpful response from Jana, the member from WHO. And she said, first build a relationship, then you can have the dialogue. And that's what partners are. You build a relationship, and then you can start having those discussions with the government. Not easy, there won't be easy situations, but if you have a relationship, you're in a position to perhaps say, well, look, we don't agree with you. But to go in and just have that discussion without the relationship doesn't work. I found that helpful.
And they are good people in government. There's so many good people in government, and when you find them, you just have to hold on. Because there are many times the ones who will call you in advance or something wrong happening and say, I didn't call you, but here's something that's about to happen.
I love how that's the same in every country, everywhere. Same. As we come to the end of this session, it would just great to hear just one word from a few people. What are you taking away? And I love Christian. Christian's going to come back at the end of the day and give us a kind of a commentary and more perspective at the end of the day. But if I was to ask you just one word, you know, what you're taking away so far, what's sparking in you so far? Who would we hear from? How about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Just one word.
Nadine.
I know this is hard. I know this is hard. One word.
Funders should always.
Funders should always.
Ask for the name of the partner.
Thank you. Jesse.
Integrity.
Integrity. Beautiful. Yes.
Dehumanization.
Dehumanization. One.
2 words.
Yes.
Situational aware.
Say it again.
Situational aware.
Situational awareness. Juan, tell us who you are, so everybody knows, just briefly.
My name is Juan Caragh.
Yeah.
My last name is Guyana.
Yeah.
And I'm the chair of the ESTHER Global Surgery here. You're welcome. What a pleasure to have you come and be at our humble facilities.
Thank you for hosting us. We're grateful. One word. Anybody else? Yes, Moses.
Accountability.
Accountability. Kira.
Imbalance.
Imbalance.
Listen.
Listen. Thora.
Humility.
Humility. Anybody else? Cara, what one word?
Accountability, but it was taken.
Sharon.
I was going to say the same as Moses, accountability.
Accountability, Joe.
Mindset.
Mindset. Beautiful. Anybody else? Yes.
Power.
Power.
Capacity too.
Capacity as well. Yes.
Empathy.
Empathy. Yeah. Maisie.
I was going to say power as well.
Hours. Yes.
Perseverance.
Say it again.
Perseverance.
Procedures. Yeah, perseverance. Thank you. And for me, listening. Listening. Christian, last word from you for now.
Last word from me,
Yes.
from now, thank you.
Woo! Okay, who feels energized?
Yeah.
Good. Good. We love this. And just to take us even further on this journey, so we're really excited today to have a panel now of our colleagues from Malawi. And we really are looking at the perspective of the Southern partner. That's what we want to know about. Carol, you are going to lead this panel. You're going to facilitate this panel. Carol O'D is the coordinator of the Eden Park Medical Standing Voice Malawi Partnership. We invited Carol to take this role on because in addition to being a part of being an ESTHER accredited partner, her work in Malawi has given her a really good insight into the Malawian context. And also, of course, because the Malawi mob, that's what I call you, the Malawi mafia are here, also has a great understanding of the Gorey Malawi partnership. So I'd like to invite our colleagues, so who's coming on this panel? Carol and Balwani, Moses and Jesse. You're very welcome. Please, yes, come on up here, please.
So this is what takes us to this sculpture. Of course, I know we have it somewhere there, and I think later on I'll take you through. But why did we come up with this sculpture in relation to our partnership? It's because of all what we've said here so far. We've said if you want to have a successful partnership, then mutual respect and support is very, very important. And at least this has been emphasized again earlier on already. So this picture here is trying to tell us about the mutual support and respect for us to actually make progress. So all what we've shared so far is going to be shown here as well. So I'll take you through quickly before I hand over to Dr. Jesse here to actually finish off with the challenges and the strength. Because no partnership can go without challenges. how good your partnership can be, but still there will be some areas that we need to improve. So Jesse will come in to talk about those things. But quickly, let me take you through this. What I'll do is I'll take you first of all to the right, to the left, and then I'll take you to the right. Why I'm saying so is because the left side here represents Ireland. I think you can look at the shamrock. Are you able to see that on the far end, which is moving through? And then it's synonymous to that in our case, we have the baobab. We have lots of baobab in Malawi. So this is Malawi, that is the island. But then we will try to make this and show how our partnership is working and how we achieve all the things together. So to start with, I think I'll take you on the middle. When we look at the middle, where we have one head that's not cannot lift a roof. I think you remember that, right? So let's go to the next slide. So the slides, I will split this into pieces so that maybe we zoom it and we're able to see. So here it is, the middle part, where we can see 3 people lifting a roof and trying to put on the house. We're saying mutual respect and support is actually very, very important. We all need each other in life so that we can actually work together. The meho. So that's what we mean here. One head does not lift up. So we go to the next. And then, as I said earlier on, we'll take you to the left of that big panel. So we just zoomed part of it. And when you look at that, I think you're able to see the map of Ireland. So this just tells us that in our relationship, in our partnership, we are able to come here, just as we've done now, where 6 of us have come all the way from Malawi to actually share experiences with you and also learn from Ireland. And that's why you can see here, on the bottom here, we can see we are in a session like this one. Here we are, and we're trying to share experiences. How do you manage health conditions here, and how do we do in Malawi, where we're not doing well, and in your case as well, so we can move together. So that's what it means here. But apart from that, you find that when we're here, of course, through our partnership, our colleagues are also able to mobilize resources as well. Of course, with support from ESTHER and other donors as well, where they normally mobilize. We have had drugs that have been, organized or mobilized from here and shared with us in Malawi. So you can see the picture down there, trying to mobilize equipment and drugs that can be shipped to Malawi to assist colleagues. But one common thing, of course, we look at Malawian side. I think you can see up there that there is a stretcher, and we can see health workers carrying a patient on the stretcher going to the hospital, just maybe from the ambulance and so on. That tells us that these conditions or diseases have no borders. So people in Ireland can also suffer, and they also need health workers. You see in Malawi again, people can suffer, and they also need health workers assist. The only difference is how they access. So you find that we have depicted in the Malawian setting there. Of course, at times, because of challenges with resources, at times they can even use a wheelbarrow. At times, yes, to carry a patient. Patient is saying yes. That's typical. So you carry, because you still want your relative to be assisted. So you carry, and then a wheelbarrow, you go to the hospital. At times we use boxers as well. But we also have other people who are capable that they can actually use a car and so on. So I think that's what we're talking about. So here we've just tried to zoom it, organizing resources. Next. Yeah, so here we're talking about shipment. Remember on the other slide, we were talking about mobilizing resources, drugs, and then other equipment to go to. So we are trying to display it here. This is map of Malawi. We are saying it's more like a potato. And this is map of Ireland. So once the resources have been mobilized and we are ready to ship them to Malawi, you can see here there are 2 main ways. We have a ship here. We assume there's a very big ocean, Ireland and Malawi. And then some of the equipments that are shipped using a boat here, going all the way to assist people in Malawi. And we also have others through the plane. We have a helicopter there. But at times, even our colleagues, when they come there, and just as we did when coming here, we use the planes and so on. So it's just showing that type of collaboration. And when we reach here, we actually offload the equipment and the resources that have been sourced from here. And then you try to use them, or pack them in the car from the airport and then go to the places where it is needed. And then this is the most exciting part. Of course, we also already mentioned that sickness knows no borders. We mentioned because we saw people from the other side in Ireland, again, the patient is sick and then using the stretcher from the ambulance. But we also mentioned that in our case, also, people can even be taken to the hospital using the wheelbarrow. I think we're able to see the wheelbarrow here, right? So that's what we're trying to depict. But then this side now, as we said earlier on, is Malawian side. And here we have the common baobab, which is known as to the shamrock. So what we're seeing there is now when our colleagues visit Malawi, was earlier on it was us visiting here, learning situation and so on as we saw. But now they have gone to Malawi. When they get there, they're assisting so many other boys as well. And we work together. We learn from each other. At times, they even assist when they're here through the butterfly, and then we do this scanning with our clinician, and then, okay, specialist services, we consult, and then the patient is there, can you move it to the left, to the right, so we have clinicians being there. And here they're able to help with continuing with the diagnosis of the rheumatic disease and other conditions, which is a plus for us as well. But now this is physical presence in Malawi. When we get there, you can see already that I was mentioning earlier on to say we had colleagues who visited us. 5 of them are in this house here, in this room. They were painting, you saw them in their work suits. And you can see there, they are very busy painting. And you can see here, of course it's the same, but this is a little bit wider. Those has covered the map of Malawi. They're trying to paint. But it's not only painting, but during that time, we had different skills amongst people who visit us, our colleagues. While others were painting, we had others who were in the clinical setting. Others were in the clinical setting, trying to assist patients. So others were in the clinical setting, helping patients. Others were painting, and the others were in the community, and so on. So this is what we're trying to depict in this case. I think, having said this, I think then, if there are more questions, we have lots of explanations in relation to this, but I was just trying to summarize. We have the panels there. At any time, we can take you through and explain. But I think next, now I'll ask my colleague to actually talk about the strength, one slide, very quickly, because the rest can be left for discussions. Yeah. And then even the challenges, quickly, the rest can be left for discussion. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Prof. Mbakaya. You've done it all, even the strengths you have already mentioned them. So I will really go quickly because I'm looking at the time also. So as he has explained almost everything, I'll just quickly go through the strength that we have seen between the partnership, Malawi and Gorey. So we have a good setup of NCD clinic with a clinician and a nurse. It was very difficult at the beginning to release a nurse to the clinic, but eventually we had the clinician and also the nurse. So we can see what partnership can do. So the partnership has been in place for more than 5 years, which is many times, as you already explained, very difficult if there are some misunderstandings, but we are happy that this one, the relationship is good and it keeps going on, and we're hoping that it will go on and on. So managing NCD patients on protocols which are working, evidenced by many patients who have well-controlled blood pressure, sugar, and also asthma. You heard from Rwani that asthma. We really had a very difficult time with asthma during our winter because we have a lot of admissions, but I can tell you nowadays we don't have admissions from asthma. And exactly 0 readmission because of what our partners have helped us to do, what protocols to use, and we have followed them and they have really helped us, and things are going on well when we're talking about asthma. So we are no longer concentrating on asthma now. We have moved on to hypertension and also diabetes because the other part we are well familiarized. So Dr. Joe, Dr. Peter, and other doctors are always available for consultation. As you heard, that they even do scan on the visually. They can scan a patient, they will comment, what is happening here, is that, and this is what you have to do. So that has helped us a lot. because our friends are always available when they are consulted. And our clinical fellow is really helped, and he has gained a lot from this. So also technical and financial support leading to improved management of NCDs at our facility, like the diagnostic equipment for diabetes, HbA1c, barometry for the asthma, they are available at the hospital, and also medicines and the campus algorithm through Action Review. So we got a very big consignment through our partners of NCD medicine, and they were almost going to expire, but we exchanged with other hospitals, with other medicines, because it was a big consignment, and it really helped our patients. As you heard that some of them are really having difficulties to continue the medication because of financial problems. And as we've said, that using campus has also helped our patients to get better and to have improved outcome. So also knowledge through teaching via Zoom and also physical, as already mentioned. RHD awareness to schools and health centers, as already also mentioned, and also training of 4 staff on patient diabetes education. So we had a training that was also visual, 2 days training for 4 of the staff that are helping in the NCD clinic. They give education, and it's really working well. Some patients that are adhering to it, they're getting better. And it's a thank you to our partners from Gorey. Exchange visits, very important. We are here. They were also in Malawi in March, as you heard, but they were in Malawi. So they were doing other things. A group was doing other things. A group was also helping in the same. So these exchange visits, they need to continue. And so connecting the hospital to other partners, for example, the innovation of our female ward. So that's what Caragh was talking about. The partners were there for a week, and they were on the ground painting, and I was also one of them helping in painting. I had to leave my practice and help in painting, because I was like, our friends have come all the way to this place, so we should also help out. And thought, and the photo that he showed, I was also there. One of the people helping to paint. So really, those are beneficial things that we can find from the partnership. And also regular visitations, supervisions and visits. So our clinical fellow is not left alone. It's Joe is always on him, and he is also pestering Joe a lot, so that things continue going well. Then extension of NCD to other Mzuzu diocese facilities. So in Mzuzu diocese, we have St. John's Hospital, Kamenya, Katete, and Mzambazi Hospital. So we said NCD should not only be at St. John's Hospital, but should also go to the other facilities, like in Kamenya. So a team was already there at Kamenya, Katete, and also Mzambazi, just to help them how they can also set up their own NCD. And I'm sure they will also have testimonies from what is starting in their facilities. Then soon, because of our NCD clinic, it's quite small one, there's a renovation that is taking place, our base unit, which does not work currently. We are renovating it to an NCD clinic, which will have a good space and a pleasant place for the patients to be coming to be seen. And also steering committee meetings that are happening twice or more a year through Zoom, also physical. So we had one in March. We are also having another one in next month in October, where Dr. Peter will come to Malawi. So we also have another physical. We had one when Sharon and Tim were in Malawi in March. So that meeting also helps a lot to be talking to each other always, so that this goes on well. And also formation of implementation group. So there's a pure implementation group that look at what is happening, where are we coming from, what are we doing, and where we are going, so that changes and whatever should pass through this group. Yes. So what are the challenges? For sure, there can be all the pleasant things, but we can also have the challenges. So the challenges so far, as I mentioned that we renovating our base unit to NCD clinic, it's inadequate clinical space. So when people get irritated, this small place, how are we going to see it? But with this, we are hoping things will change. So that's one of the challenges. And also non-reliable, irregular, and of medical supplies. Sometimes we can have enough overflowing medications, but in other times we may have no medications for our patients. And patients, when they are coming to you, they know they are going to be treated fully. But when they come and then you don't have the resources, it puts them off. And it also puts off the one who is taking care of them, because you're thinking they're coming to be helped and there's no medical supplies. So most patients, they fail to pay the hospital bills. We heard that there's a reduction in the amount they're supposed to pay. Even that little they're supposed to pay, many of our patients, they're not able to pay. So they end up stopping taking the medications, and then they flare up again. So good things that have already happened, then they go back to where they are coming from. So difficulties in coordinating between different parties, e.g. finances with diocese, delay in paying the honorarium to the clinical fellow and the nurse, when things go under hierarchy for the ground people to get what they are supposed to get, the resources, sometimes it takes long. And especially because our team also wants to, the Gorey team also wants to go through our bosses. And for us to get the resources that we need, sometimes it's challenging, especially to our clinical fellow and the nurse. And the clinical fellow is always talking, and it's not happy with what is happening, because sometimes they get 4 months, 5 months without getting what they're supposed to get. So busy clinical jobs and other demands on both sides needs commitment from both sides. So sometimes you have to stop what you're doing just to get this going. So sometimes it gets overwhelming. Understanding of challenges from both sides and engaging wider stakeholders. So we have to remember that it's not only about you who is there, but let others also learn about it and also present like we are doing here. Yes. Done. Okay, so what's the way forward? After the challenges, after the strength, what's the way forward? One, we have already said that innovations of this unit to ACT clinic to get a pleasant place and a better, nice, adequate room for the patients and also for the workers for sure. And then, if possible, to separate NCD budget for the medical supplies and to levy for support on medication, to have always what medication is needed for our patients if possible. And then lobby for donor support to help payment of hospital bills for the needed patients. For the clinic to continue, at least the patient has to pay in a little something. Otherwise, we may end up having no medication, having no staffing. So if we can lobby for that donor support, like maybe a service level agreement, that once the patient has been seen, this is what can be paid on behalf of that patient. And then implementation group to focus on day-to-day issues and also provide solutions, e.g. Gorey support to the staff, like the clinical fellow and nurse, through the agreed hospital dollar account rather than passing through our bosses, if that's possible. And then to continue with exchange visits. Also further training for our clinical fellow. So if possible, if he can at least also train more apart from what he's doing today, to have, to gain more knowledge. And also maybe there will be a need for strategic plan in the future. And also good staff training plan for St. John's Hospital. That what about if this fellow is sick or something happens to the fellow, or if he wants to go to school, what next? Are we going to continue with NCD, or this will be the end of NCD? You know projects where there have been donors. The moment the donors go out, then the projects, they die. But we want it to be a continued thing, that no matter what happens, it will continue. That's it. Okay. So in the long run, what we want to achieve is to broaden focus beyond NCDs to primary care. So apart from doing the NCDs, what about what Dr. Marai was talking about? What about the COVID that came in? What about the HIV? What about the other communicable diseases? Are we only going to concentrate on NCD, or are we going to move on? Then we want students from Ireland to go to Malawi through our network to practice family medicine and community pharmacy in the rural setting. We are currently organizing the type of experiences. We have had Malawian clinicians visiting Ireland and also working on the curriculum. And this slide was actually supposed to be presented by Caragh, but I'll finish. So we want to pass on this working and trusting partnership to the next generation. We are currently mentoring young professionals and engaging them in our project. We want to build an Irish community in Malawi and Malawian community in Ireland. And the ideas and people who travel between both countries as the swallow with Weru does each year. The swallow with Weru here. So I think that's that. And that's the stuff for St. John's. You can see some people that are here. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jessie. That was really interesting. I don't know from the perspective of the room where, I mean, you want to ask some questions. I'm certainly interested more in the challenges, because I can see you have a very successful partnership that's been building over the years, and looking at it, their resources going forwards, because I know we find the same thing. It's the challenge of people on the ground having the resources to be able to continue coming and to be able to afford to go to a clinic, and I know St. John's is a CHAM hospital, so there's a charge when you go there. So it's having that and having the resources. I really admire how you managed to bring that drug bill down on a yearly basis. I really want to know about that, because that's a huge challenge for us, even with sunblock, trying to get it on a government list, and even though it's on the list, it's probably not available in most of the facilities. So it's just the challenges I'm interested in, how you're getting over those challenges. Balwani, if you were looking for a new partner to take on any of those challenges, maybe, or to extend it, what kind of qualities would you be looking for? Or Joe Balwani?
Not to avoid the colleagues twisting their legs.
Come on, yeah. Why don't you, Moses, do you want to come up to Bessie?
I live in Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, Mark, Control, be here. Anyway, some of our colleagues can take the questions while from there. Yes, so the question again.
So it's qualities in a partner going forward. I mean, how to get over some of the challenges that you're facing, which I think as partnerships generally we all face. So, what kind of qualities would you be looking for in donors or partners? Is it the flexibility that Christian was talking about? Is it asking what you need? Because you've outlined very clearly what you need.
Thank you so much for your question. Of course, most of the things that you possibly would want for like donors to actually assist when we want to continue with the quality of the partnership that actually mentioned would be the issues to do with discussing shared interests. Because already we've said, like in our case, we have issues that are well stipulated in our national agenda as a country, which are ranking highly as priorities. And normally there's a mutual discussion with our partners. So they have to learn from us in terms of what we want to be done in this case. Just as earlier on she presented, say, we want to expand the NCD clinic. It's now small. So then we'll be comfortable that those who are joining us is actually be able to understand what we want in this case.
Yeah. Okay, so listen.
Yeah, listening. Yes.
Would anybody else have any questions for any of our friends from Malawi here?
Thanks very much, and thank you all for the presentation. It's really inspiring work, amazing to see how it's grown over the years. Just this was a very practical question. So I heard there about the steering committee that you have that meets a couple of times a year. So it's the high level decision making on a, let's say, week to week and month to month basis. How does it work? Are there regular scheduled meetings? Is there a particular individual who is, in charge of the project management? And how does that kind of communication piece work? And also, how does, let's say, planning and reporting work? Do you develop an annual work plan and hold yourselves accountable to that, or is it more of a flexible, ongoing way of working?
Okay. Thank you so much for your question. Of course, there are few of us, and we also have our colleagues here. I think we not mentioned earlier on, of course, he just mentioned his name. He's the hospital administrator for St. John's, and she's the director and the obstetrician. Yeah, so I think you can take it.
Okay, yeah. So for the steering committee meetings, they're supposed to happen 2 times a year. So they're usually scheduled. Most of the time is March and October.
Sorry, Jess, can you just find out who's on the steering committee?
Who is on the steering committee? So it's St. John's Hospital.
Yeah.
Then there's the ministry, one person from the ministry, one person from St. John's Institute, there's one from St. Luke's International, and then our partner here, John, Peter, they are on that steering committee.
So you meet twice a year?
Yes, twice.
And then on an ongoing basis, as Eric said?
So on ongoing phases, I kept on talking about the clinical fellow and clinical needs. So those are the ones who are doing the clinics, ongoing clinics. And then every month they give a report. So as you were saying that they are able to see the report on the red cup. So Joe, Peter here, they get the report on a monthly basis. How many patients have been seen? How many patients? How are the blood pressures being controlled? And everything that has been done. Thank you.
Because I don't know if you, but we found what Christian talked about, the good things about Zoom, and one of the good things for us about Zoom was we started having weekly meetings on Zoom with our partners. And we now do it sometimes, depending on the time of year, even twice a week from an admin point of view and then clinical point of view. So we find that it works really, really well, and it keeps the momentum of the project going when we're not there, which we found was a problem when we first started, that everything was great when we were there, and then we'd leave, and it wasn't quite they were clapping us out, Christian, but you felt everything slowed down and the momentum wasn't there. So we found Zoom was great and worked well both ways, and also we could share, as you said, clinical data, and we now use tablets, so they're uploaded, so all the data from that, and we hope that will be a great research tool and will give more funding in the future because of that.
Yeah, so also weekly Zoom meetings they do happen with the clinical fellow and the institute. Joe, so they reminded me that it's or two meetings.
And maybe just to add on that, of course, that in the clinic we have full-time clinician and a nurse who are managing the MCD clinic. And of course, it is available. Of course, we were discussing that last month, Joe, that we need to actually analyze because very rich data. So we need actually to export it from the red cup, and then try to use the VT and statistical tools to analyze and look at the trend, and then make some recommendations and improve the general working.
Moses, how do you feel that the project kind of integrates into the hospital? Because obviously this is they're running NCD clinics, it's not part of the general hospital. You kind of, how do you feel the whole thing is integrated?
No, I think it's wonderful that we have that NCD clinic, but what is also bringing much exciting is that the project of NCD is extending to other hospitals. Like we mentioned 3 areas. Those areas, that means NCD clinic has covered almost the northern part of Malawi.
That's fantastic.
So it's very exciting.
And are they district hospitals?
Yeah, they are district hospitals.
Yeah.
Of course, just to add on what Moses said, of course, yeah, they are operating at district level. Because there are hospitals like St. John, but they are CHAM, Tertiary Health Association of Malawi hospitals. But that level, like secondary, also primary, secondary, and tertiary. Tertiary, there are referral hospitals. Secondary, there are district hospitals. So St. John's, just like the other facilities like Katete, where we're extending the NCD services, they are at that level, secondary, which is district.
Well, it's very interesting because NCDs are obviously a huge problem here as much as in Malawi, and I found that intriguing that people were telling me about diabetes has been hugely on the rise, and when we first went to Malawi, so it's really interesting to be able to share the knowledge. But I think the HSE could learn a lot from the pricing of the drugs that are bringing the cost down. So, because that's what we felt, we learned a lot, even in a practice like we're a GP practice. And after we learned that there's a lot of clinical officers in Malawi that do the job of a lot of doctors here in Ireland. And we also felt there were healthcare workers who did the jobs of nurses. So we in the practice took on a healthcare assistant. And now they do a lot of tasks that we previously probably would have only had a nurse do. So we as a practice learned that, you know, there's a lot of jobs within the practice. We just learned a lot from the way Malawians manage their budgets and manage their situation. So that was a good learning experience as well. Now I think it's 12 o'clock. Would anybody have any more questions? Because I know people are anxious to break for lunch. So, or another session, please. Anybody else? I'm sure everybody will have a look at the carbons later, and I'm sure our Malawi will be happy to talk us through some of them, because I know some of them are not just on the partnership, but some of them are on yeah, exactly. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a fascinating session. Please don't think lunch is coming right now. Sorry. A bit more important than that. So, just hope you keep your appetite whetted. But I'm delighted that Holmes is able to join us today, and from Irish Aid, Department of Foreign Affairs, and Anna's Traveller for Memories, which we're very grateful for. Where Irish Aid is a very important partner for us. We wouldn't have the ESTHER programme without Irish Aid. They provide us funding, but also a key partner in what we do. And we talked about kind of the Global Partnership for Development, and Ireland is a partner in global development. And we all contribute in some small way to that overall partnership. And what's very important for us is that we're aligned with Ireland's overall approach and Ireland's policy on development, which is called A Better World. And partnership is a key part of that. So I'm delighted you could come and share with us today. So just say a little bit about Anne for those of you who don't know that. I mean, Anne has a long background in development and humanitarian action and business process development, and has worked with Irish NGOs and Department of Foreign Affairs for almost 3 decades, I believe. And many assignments, including Deputy Head of Mission at the Embassy of Ireland in Malawi and Deputy Head of Cooperation at the Embassy of Ireland in Ethiopia. So I have a lot of experience, and I'm delighted to come share with us today. Thank you.
Thanks a million, David. Colleagues, good afternoon. We were indeed to the Malawi colleagues, Takulandarani to Dublin. I was working on that for a few minutes. Deep apologies. Sure. Yeah. Deep apologies to the organisers for being late. We will blame the Irish farming community this week. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's the ploughing championship, the national ploughing championship, which involves tens of thousands of people from all over the island of Ireland, all congregating in one spot, which happens to be halfway between Limerick and here. So getting public transport from Limerick to here this morning was fun, shall I just say. And for those of you who are travelling, if you have nothing on your schedule, I would actually say maybe try and find time, get your wellies, get your raincoats and go down. It's a bit like the Lilongwe Fair used to be, on a fairly grand scale, so you might find it entertaining. Apologies also to the colleague from Tokra, I'm cutting into your slot. I'm going to keep it very brief. I did have kind of nice formal prepared remarks for the outset to kind of feed in with Nadine and David, but having listened, I did manage to grab a couple of minutes of the earlier session on the live stream over the excitable farmers, but I didn't catch an awful lot of it. But what I do realise is the conversation has progressed quite a bit, I think, since you opened this morning. So, but I still do want to say, so I'm kind of going to do one of these Hollywood moments where you kind of, this is what I was going to say, but this is what I'm really going to say. But I do really want to just back to IGHN and the ESTHER colleagues. You know, this is an excellent conversation. It's been a conversation we've all been having for a very, very long time, but we don't tend to have it with the kind of degree of openness and, you know, the challenge that has been thrown down with us today. So I'm absolutely delighted to be in a position where we can kind of really throw down some personal and professional reflections on how this whole agenda has been bothering us for quite some time, bothering all of us on either side of the divide, because, you know, we do talk about the north and the south, the global north and on the global south. So anything that we can do in the conversation today to try and kind of advance that, bring it on as far as I'm concerned. So I thought rather than kind of just, I mean, I do need to earn my salary. Yes, Irish Aid, Development Cooperation Division, I'm one of 2 policy leads in our policy health, global health leads in our policy unit in the Development Cooperation in the Department of Foreign Affairs. And yes, we are delighted to have the opportunity to provide financing to the ESTHER partnership via the HSE and to the IGHN and to a number of other partners. There's a great conversation that goes on there continually, so we're really pleased and, you know, privileged to have that opportunity. The people-to-people dimension, I just want to state as well before I forget, the people to make the kind of the function that the ESTHER partnership does and that the IGHN does in terms of kind of opening up the conversation and opening up the participation in development cooperation at a global level to kind of non-experts. As we're called, in our system, we're called development specialists, which suggests that we're experts. We're not. We move around, we do lots of different jobs at a different time, but opening it up beyond our kind of community that tends to deal a lot in groupthink and talk to each other quite a lot is emphatically something that the Department of Foreign Affairs is very committed to. So in our policy for development cooperation, localisation and empowerment of civil society organisations and empowerment of civil society organisations in the global south to truly own and lead on the development for sustainability and for practical reasons. It's more efficient, it's more effective, it'll last longer. You know, you're less likely as a Malawian to run away. I think that was one of the comments that was made. Where's Christian? Sorry, I'm not sure. Christian, how are you? I did catch a few minutes of your opening talk. I could hear you, couldn't see you. You mentioned something about the minute a crisis comes that people run away. You know, we do it. When COVID hit Malawi, we were based in Malawi, we weren't actually there, we couldn't get back. What did we do as a family? We ran away. So, you know, we're all coupled, we're all in that space. So from a policy perspective, the government is very committed to this localisation agenda. We have been talking about it. I did bring a copy. We have a 2007 or 8, I'm not entirely sure. We have a local development policy that one of my colleagues remarked, you know, could have been written, was written and published in around about 2007, could have been written yesterday. It's still very, very relevant, which itself points to, well, if we've been saying and talking about this for quite a long time, what are we not necessarily doing? What have we obviously not been getting right? Because we're still at this conversation. Since this policy was developed, we have actually, the whole conversation globally has accelerated a little bit, and particularly in recent years, and it's a really welcome kind of disruption to the narratives that we've all been kind of, especially those of us who read it for 3 decades. Is it that long really? It's quite a while, you're making me think. But, you know, we're at, I think, a really good moment in time now where we're just a bit more able to be challenged. So I really welcome the challenge function that you're throwing down. You know, it's an uncomfortable space for many of us, especially those of us longer in the tooth. Bring it on. Just kind of to go back just to the policy, since the early 2020s, so 2001 and 2002, we have, as part of our policy commitments, we have signed up to the Grand Bargain 2.0 commitments, and also a kind of a cooperative framework underneath the OECD DAC. So the OECD, we're a member of the OECD DAC community. The development assistance community within that has got a framework that we have signed up, which sets out our obligations as a donor to really invest in this localisation agenda. And it sets out kind of specific targets and arrangements that we need to meet in order to truly deliver on this agenda. I can share the links first. I won't, use the time now to go into the specifics of it, but one of the key things is around the kind of, we need to set targets for ourselves in terms of how much of our funding resources are on-granted to local organisations. So, and thankfully we're actually doing quite well. Ireland does tend to do quite well on the ranking tables compared to other EU member states, in large part because of where our development cooperation kind of community has evolved over the years, and thanks to organisations like TROPA, like Goal, like Concern. But TROPA, I think, would have been at the forefront, going back from its inception in the 70s, of being one of the organisations that kind of grappled with the whole idea of partnership, not being an operation entity that piloted it in and piloted it back out. The other organisations have all come well on board, sometimes leapfrogging, so we do have a good history. Within the development cooperation remit, there's a target of early 20s, early 20%, something like 22, 25%. 25%. Okay, you can cover this. I'll move on. I'll move on. You can come back to it. So Ireland does tend to do well because we give a significant portion of our funding to civil society organisations. 22% of our money goes to civil society organisations in the first place, and then subsequently the 25% then must be ungranted. We think we're doing okay on that regard. We think we also do quite well on the bilateral, so that's our government-to-government funding and also our money through the UN system as well. So, but that's, but we still have a long way to go, and this is going back to, delving into the coming years of experience. And the point about we had a lovely policy in 2007, yet we're still having this conversation today, and it's like, clearly we're getting a lot of it wrong. We're getting a lot of it right, but we're also not getting part of it, we're not getting all of it right. And I think this goes to the theme today, this whole thing of like really kind of opening up the conversation around about what does equality and partnership mean? And what is a true partnership? And this whole thing that I think you were mentioning too of like, we'll pilot in with our briefcases, speaking from the donor perspective. And we'll have our agenda, we'll have what we want to say, we'll have what we want you to do, and there's an element of, yes, here they come. Yeah. How much longer now? Or, when is the next one going to be? And we'll say this, in order. So, there's a game that has been played. Sometimes very effectively. Sometimes we all know what we're doing in the game and we're all happy when we go away. But then, there is an awful lot of experience of where, it didn't work too well. One of the kind of reasons I would feel, personally, quite passionately, quite strongly about this is dating back to forcing me to think back into history. In the early 90s, I was a volunteer with an organisation, not an Irish organisation. I was working in South Sudan, so it was a conflict zone at the time, and I was given loads of different briefs, but one of them was, we have a load of money from the EU, would you ever go in there and find some bridges and build them? So I was like, okay, sure, I'll do that. No engineering background, no technical background whatsoever, but I was responsible as this kind of untrained, novice, clueless, green, enthusiastic. I'd say that was probably my only real skill set. Enthusiastic individual in a situation, in a conflict zone, trying to build bridges. So I was fortunate that on one phone call home, speaking to my dad, there's civil and mechanical engineers in the family, speaking to them, I mentioned I was going to build some bridges. The reaction on the home end of the phone was, you are what? You have no qualifications. What do you think? So that kind of hit home in a way that I hadn't expected. So I kind of, with my tail between my legs, went out and I went around and I discovered in one of the displaced people camps an octogenarian Sudanese engineer, highly qualified mechanical engineer, who was in an IDP camp, living in, not even in a tent, these were long-term IDP camps, so he was living in one of these kind of tuples on stilts, and he had 2 or 3 cows, and I think his only kind of material asset was a small little transistor radio. So, he then transpired to be the senior engineer and basically the mastermind behind the project that subsequently unfolded. We did get a whole lot of bridges built, he put together a team, but he did everything. So, and it was purely on the basis of random chance. So the arrogance, first of all, of me, the organisation, going into that kind of, the arrogance of asking money from the donor in the first place, then taking it, and then going in and, expecting a young one who knew nothing about it to kind of deliver results in that, has stuck with me all the way through, and it has really, really bothered me. I was lucky I found the right person at the right time. I could easily not have made that call home, and I could easily have squandered all of those resources, which weren't mine or ours to squander. They were donated in good faith through a system. And so, I mean, that's just one of the reflections that has kind of driven me the whole way through. We see it, and then, you know, that's carried all the way through. So there is kind of this, I've also seen it, you know, you forget your humility as a donor. You forget that there is, you know, yeah, at the end of the day, you are holding the briefcase and you do make the final call on it. So I think it's very helpful to have this conversation today, rather than kind of give suggestions around about what, you know, what we think you as ESTHER members need to be doing in order to get this right. I would really love to use this opportunity to hear from the colleagues, Christian in particular, around one particular area of focus within this whole dialogue, which is within the Grand Board of Accounting Fundamentals and the OECD framework, is around about the need to really ensure, for the localisation agenda to happen, the whole issue of fiduciary risk, political risk, institutional risk, absorption capacity, and the obligations that are on not us now as donors to really incentivise and invest in organisational development to ensure that the amount of money that is available, potentially available, can flow freely, really is pushing into kind of a conversation that is quite uncomfortable for lots of different reasons, and is unpopular and is tiresome, is the impression I get, but I'd really love to know how that is perceived. And then there's the other kind of issue as well around about a concern that we've picked up about, that, you know, this whole agenda is around about putting ourselves at an even greater distance and passing on risk, not just the financial risk, but passing on the political risk. And I just kind of want to flag as well, you know, for organisations that are working in places like Uganda, for example, or in other parts of the world, where you're working on sexual and reproductive health and rights, for example. So, you know, the risk associated, are we just kind of stepping out of that space and kind of going, ooh, that's tricky, that's dangerous, but leaving some of our partners in a very uncomfortable space in that. So I'd love to kind of get some views on that. I think just some of the learnings, and again, we'd love to have these kind of picked up and maybe a hole punched in them, or kind of, or whatever, is that we have found over the years that when things work well, sometimes it's fortuitous, sometimes we just happen to have the right group of people in the room at the right time. But a lot of the time, when you really kind of reflect on why something didn't work as well, or why we're still struggling with, you know, food security, say, in Malawi, why we're still kind of, what, you know, while some of the same problems come up year after year, or in our system, you know, posting after posting, every 2 years somebody goes out, discovers an issue that the team before them hasn't solved, so they're going to solve it. So there's lots of repeat problems that kind of stick around. We do feel that within those kind of repeat problems, it's where we have come as donors with a kind of it's supply driven. The ideas are ours and the financing is ours. And it's not necessarily allowed us to really kind of sit back or sit still really and listen, and then kind of take the leap of faith that is needed to put the donor resources into a primarily Malawian, Ugandan, whatever country we're talking about kind of setting. So, you know, the supply versus the demand side of things. And then it's like, okay, well, if it's that simple, how do you improve that? So are we, part of our problem as well seems to be the fact that we kind of come in with not just a preset agenda, but the agenda doesn't necessarily always align with what it is we actually have to offer. So it's around about, you're laughing there, I'm dying to hear what you have to say. There's also a tend to kind of sway with, you know, this year we were all really into shock resilience and social protection. Next year we are all really into sexual and reproductive health. Next, you know, there's all of these different themes that we move on, we make a mistake there, so let's rebrand and call it something else and see if we can get it right this time. I think in our reflections, we kind of feel that part of it is to do with the fact of not being clear enough on what it is that we actually have to offer, and not recognising that there is a division of labour. So we might bring money to the table. Sometimes we won't bring money to the table, sometimes we'll bring particular skills mix. And again, this I think would probably be a bit more relevant for the colleagues in the global health dimensions. You know, it's skills. This is really the ESTHER Alliance is really around about professional skills, which are resources, you know, as our money. So it's just how you identify and how you properly articulate what it is that you have to offer, and how do we facilitate a conversation where partners in the global south are better able to kind of sit back and kind of maybe shop around a little bit. You know, that it's not a case of us coming in with the ideas, with the suggestions, the financing, but rather that we kind of sit here and then wait for the call. Can we do that? Are we able to do that? Just throw that out there. I'm sure I did have other points that I wanted to make, but I'm very conscious that I think that's my colleague from Trocra. I don't know, Nadine, do you want to run run it on, or do you want to?
I think it'd be great to hear from Christian just to some of your points.
Excellent, thank you.
Just that we just have a little conversation. I think because this whole topic is moving through the whole day, so I think it's lovely just to take the opportunity. So Christian, yeah, just love to hear any comments and responses.
Thank you for putting me on the spot.
Christian, would you mind coming up here just because I was going to say we can't hear you, but that's not true. We can't see you. I want everyone to be able to see you who's online.
Yes, my mother said my voice carries naturally.
She was right.
Yeah, there we go. It's just refreshing hearing some of the things you say, especially that experience you had. I wish, in Sudan, I wish more people had that experience, but they don't. And so the arrogance sets in and stays forever. And it is wonderful. You stay here for 3 decades without losing, the bid. The issue of transferring political risk, that one is a real issue. Because believe it or not, when there is a partner, say like Irish Aid there, many times they can take certain shocks that we can't take. Say in Uganda, I think that democratic governance facility ran into a lot of trouble, and the NGOs were shut down. Several of them were shut down, bank accounts frozen because they got too close to the ruling what do you call them? I don't want to miss my opportunity to get back into Uganda, but yeah, to the people who are running our country. It got too close to them, and so they had to cut it down. But I say, when DGF started in Uganda, there were a group of us, non-profits, that went to speak with the donors that had that basket funding to say, here are certain blinders that you're not seeing, and we were kicked out of the EU delegation's office because what we were saying, those were inconvenient truths. But guess what? As the facility was getting shut down, they came back and we said, it's too late. Already these people have their fingers in, it's too late. We tried to tell you several years earlier where the pitfalls were, and you didn't want to listen because you had a bunch of money. So again, it comes down to that humility and listening, because that democratic governance facility is, I think, is a lost opportunity in shining a light on transparency and accountability. And if there had been a better design, a kind of real core design, it probably would still be there now. And I just remembered one way we navigate issues with politics is by hiring spies. I have 2 of them in my organization, internal security agents, and they help a lot in saying, here are the problems. And this is the, when they disappear, I don't ask any questions. I know they will be back with a lot of valuable information about where we might land into trouble. I forgot to mention that earlier about how you kind of navigate those choppy political waters. What else did I underline here? The relevance. I put 2 lines underneath because I think that beyond the political risk and beyond the financial risk, the real risk is in becoming irrelevant. And the more there are these projects that say, yeah, as you put it so well, this year we are doing sexual and reproductive health. Next year we are going to do climate change and health. The next year we are going to do the value of peanut in prolonging life. Things like that. Those things right now, eventually people get exhausted and you become irrelevant. And guess what? Your power has disappeared, just like that. And so on a financial risk, there are going to be failures, but I think it is worth it to invest in organizations and their long-term futures. Because again, it's a question of what's the legacy you want to leave? Is it a legacy just project by project, and we are out? What we heard from colleagues in Malawi, it was so well stated that they come and they go, and that's the end of it. Nothing stays. But if there is that view again, it's a restating. Because in the short term, if you're doing project by project, you have a lot of power. You have that briefcase. But what's not realized is that short term erodes any kind of trust or trustworthiness you may have had, any kind of long-term impact. And yet the more you look at 10, 15 years, because Irish Aid will be there for 10, 15, 150 years, when you look at strengthening the organization from its foundations, it lasts longer, has more relevance and more meaning, but that's the hard work. That's the hard work that you can't report on. You know, we saw the metrics here. It's very easy to report me. I have a colleague who says, tell me whatever you want to tell me, I'll quantify it for you. It's very easy to report metrics. It's difficult to report what actually is relevant and what adds meaning to people's lives. Let's take now the conversation on diversity, equity, inclusion. The easiest piece to quantify, diversity. Because I can sit there and tell you we have this many yellow people, this many black people, this many women, this many in between, this many white, this many yellow-haired people, and so on. I've achieved diversity. There are your numbers. But how about the inclusiveness? And it's difficult now for me to quantify how people's voices have been heard and acted upon. And that is where the real power, long-term, meaningful power lies. And it builds everyone, makes everyone powerful.
And any last word from you, and then we're going to go over to Ruchi.
No, thank you. Thanks a million for that. I really do just want to hear how the conversation goes, because I'm definitely, we need to be in learning mode. So, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Christian. Ruchi, how are you? So Ruchi is with us. Ruchi Junnarkar, hope I said that correctly. She's currently the Partnership and Localisation Advisor at Troca, although I don't know after today if you're going to rethink your title, because I'm not sure we're settled on whether localisation is actually a good term or something we need to question.
In the morning I was saying, I'm going to come and talk about that thing that Christian does not like.
Yes, so, notice the discomfort again, this whole day is about feeling the discomfort. Suddenly, I was thinking about you, you stand in, and here you have like me standing here with the title of Global South, advisor or something, like, oh! But you're very welcome. Ruchi has worked as a social policy researcher at the Centre for Policy Research in Delhi. She's also worked with grassroots organisations in India and on the implementation of equitable and innovative educational programming. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about power and financing, exactly on the themes of what we're talking today, and power in partnerships. So over to you, and also welcome to ask questions of our beautiful audience here.
Lovely, thanks very much, Nadine. So I had the delightful joy of being the last session before lunch for, I'm sure, a very hungry audience. I was also thanking my stars in the morning that I wasn't going to follow Christian, but now I am. So unfortunately, don't have the strength of personality, the force of personality to do without slides, but we will try and keep this hopefully as tight as possible, and so we have some time for discussion. I am here to talk about that word that nobody seems to like these days, localization, and I will refer to how that is changing as well in the discourse. My job today is to do two things. One, to give a bit of an overview of what the global discourse has looked like on this topic of localization, and secondly, to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at Troca. And I think Anne has covered good ground in terms of the first bit of it, so I'll try and skip whatever has already been touched upon. So just to start with the first, well, maybe go back for a second. How many of you, we've all by now heard of the term localization. How many of you would feel confident defining it?
In this room or outside of this room?
In this room. How many of you would feel you have a reasonable degree of confidence to define what localization means? Don't worry, I won't call on you to answer. Okay, one, Eric, thank you. Well, you're not alone, because my next slide speaks to exactly this thing in the sector, in that localization, in fact, has been understood and interpreted in many different ways by different actors. I found it quite funny that one of a recent landscape report says the term localization has always been ill-defined, serving as an umbrella term for nearly any kind of humanitarian reform involving local actors. And despite a lot of work and research that is ongoing, there's still a lack of consensus about what localization actually means in practice. A bit scathing, but there's a grain of truth in that. And as you can see, there have been various different definitions and commitments on this overarching topic of localization through different international instruments. So the Grand Bargain is one that Anne referenced, which talked about making principled humanitarian action as local as possible and as international as necessary. They tried to quantify it, as we were talking, by this metric of 25% of funding going as directly as possible to local actors. And then subsequently in response to that, there were a whole bunch of other commitments and conversations that said it's not just the money, it's not just the 25%. So the Charter for Change was a network of both local and national NGOs, of international and international NGOs that defined 8 commitments that INGOs like Trokra would sign on to as their commitment to localization. The START network ran a large research program that defined 7 dimensions of localization. There has most recently been a Pledge for Change initiative, which has identified 3 pledges for localization. So various commitments, definitions, pledges exist. And there has been an evolution of different rationales for it, different definitions, different agenda, and different language for localization from various different stakeholders and perspectives. We've unpacked a lot of what these definitions touch on and these frameworks touch on throughout the morning, so I won't spend too much time on it. But if you want to kind of if you want to go to one definition that I find useful, or one framework that I find useful to refer to, is the one that was put forward towards the beginning of the conversation, really, by, and when I say beginning of the conversation, I mean the recent phase of the conversation that kind of started around 2016 with the World Humanitarian Summit. There is a network for empowered, next slide please. There is an organization called the Network for Empowered Aid Response. It is a network of global south or global majority or local or national organizations challenging or positioning themselves in the humanitarian space. And they had put forward a framework on localization which identified these different pillars. And they had referenced the OECD definition, which mentions localization, which defines it in this way, which is localizing humanitarian response, or localization is a process of recognizing, respecting, and strengthening the leadership by local actors and the capacity of local civil society in humanitarian action in order to better address the needs of affected populations and to prepare national actors for future humanitarian responses. Now, this is 2017. The conversation has significantly moved on since then. We no longer speak of localization only in the humanitarian setting. We no longer reference it only in terms of greater effectiveness. There is a stronger justice and equity conversation attached to it. The word localization itself has been challenged, as you've heard today. But I find some of the key ideas that this framework has identified still hold true, and it's just useful to unpack them briefly. We spoke about participation of affected communities in the humanitarian context, what used to be referred to as beneficiaries in the decision making of their own, of large decisions that are going to impact their lives. And as we heard earlier this morning, local people are the experts in their own lives, and very often decisions are made about what work is to be done for them and with them, without them. So that's one of the key pillars. The second question is this, again, very nebulous and problematic question of capacity. When we talk about capacity building, capacity strengthening, capacity sharing, mutual capacity exchange, again, the terminology has been shifting. But it's an idea of supporting organizations that are doing the work on the ground to have all of the skills, resources, tools, the capacity to do what they want to do. And also recognizing that there is already capacity and expertise there. And we are not building things from scratch, that capacity needs to be reinforced and this is not a unidirectional exchange as Christian and many of the others mentioned today. Partnerships, doing partnerships better. we've been working in partnerships forever, but I think the question now is how we work in partnerships. Are these partnerships equitable? Are they mutual in terms of both accountability, in terms of respect? What is the quality of these partnerships? That's something that the localization talks about. Funding, there may as well have been a huge slide with a giant circle in itself called funding, because that is the crux of a lot of the conversation and again we've touched upon. The question about funding though here, within the context of localization, is again what Christian referred to. When you give funding, what are the strings it comes attached with? What are the compliance requirements it comes attached with? What are the due diligence processes? What are the reporting requirements? How much headache are you actually taking on or giving to the people that you're also, or the communities that you're also supporting with funding? So how is it that we do the funding and how can it be done better? What is also the quality of funding? So we spoke about things like flexibility and how flexibility is important in terms of changing your plans, changing your decisions, using funds for things that had not been anticipated when the project plan was developed. A key conversation in localization has been about the availability of funds for an organization's own resilience. So we fund programs, but how many of us are funding core operational costs for these local and national organizations that are running in these environments? And that doesn't just mean you can put in a budget line on your electricity and on your building rental costs. It means things like building up an organization's reserves. So tomorrow, when one program partnership ends and there's a gap of 4 months before the next project starts, a local organization does not have to lose their qualified and competent staff because they cannot afford to keep them on their payroll because they don't have organizational reserves. So that question of building up, providing funding that is quality funding that allows organizations to sustain themselves and build their own resilience is another question that has come in under the localization conversation. Coordination and complementarity. This is acutely evident in the humanitarian situation, but it applies across the board where there is an earthquake and there are 5,000 international organizations that descend in the one city that has been the epicenter of the earthquake, who do not speak to each other, or if they speak to each other, they certainly do not speak to the local actors who have been affected by the earthquake themselves, or the existing local organizations that are already embedded in the communities and doing that work themselves. Maybe because they don't speak the same language, maybe because they are holding all their meetings in the capitals and air-conditioned offices where community-based actors don't often go. But for whatever reason, there is a lack of coordination between international actors when they descend on a place, and a lack of complementarity in terms of supporting existing efforts. And there is a reinvention of the wheel when people land up in a place. And again, like I said, it's acutely visible in the humanitarian space, but it's true throughout. And finally, the last pillar there is policy influence and visibility, which speaks to how visible the work and effort of local and national actors is, both to donors and to the broader public as well. So TROGRA, for example, and lots of INGOs, we fundraise from the Irish public. Yet how many people that we fundraise from will associate the work that we do with our partners? They will associate it with TROGRA. Similarly for the donors, one of the key things is our local partners demand is that none of your reports mention us. We're the ones doing the work. Does the donor know it's us doing the work? You know, like that's one of the key demands. This demand for visibility is one thing that has been emphasized in the localization discourse, which also affects their ability to influence decisions and shape policy for things that affect their lives. So I find this, like I said, there are many definitions and many aspects to it, but there are also multiple frameworks that currently exist that have tried to provide a holistic or comprehensive view of it. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look at it, because I think it might put into donor speak some of the open conversation we've been having throughout the morning. And I just want to mention very briefly before I move on to TROGRA's work of how the conversation is shifting. So if you go to the next slide, please. you will see that there has been now an evolution of this language as we have been speaking. And part of the reason that I think the language was so tricky to begin with is at the beginning when localization was decided as something that the community would work on, there were very few local and national actors who were actually involved in that conversation themselves. And as the conversation has expanded and as people have realized, hang on, they're talking about something that's relevant to me, but it doesn't sound like it's something I want to get on board with, the language has also shifted. And one of the it is now evolving in the direction of this word, which you don't see very well there, called decolonization. Now, decolonization is a tricky word in Ireland. We don't have the same history as a lot of other European donor nations. I think it is Ireland's unique history that also makes it often a good partner to work with because there is a lot of empathy for that. And a lot of my colleagues from other countries don't often know, and as I wasn't aware until much later in life, is that Ireland was in fact colonized for much longer than India was, or a lot of the countries where this work happens was. And yet, it's interesting that Ireland is positioned in the global minority or the global north today, and that has its own reasons and its own dynamics. So even though Ireland doesn't have that specific history, I think there is a need to have a conversation on where Ireland's position is in terms of this decolonization conversation and what our role in that discourse is. Because by virtue of the position that Ireland now occupies, we have a tremendous ability to influence. And I think it is our responsibility to use that and to shift the conversation in the sector, as I think we're doing, particularly with Irish Aid and the leadership role that Irish Aid has taken on some of these conversations. So it's encouraging to see. I won't go into all of those. I'll just reference this report called the Time to Decolonize Aid report that came out in 2021. It really unpacks, I think, very effectively and practically a lot of the ways in which this structural racism that decolonization speaks to shows up in our work. So in very tangible terms, it talks about things like recruitment and implicit bias in recruiting Western educated white staff into management and leadership positions. It talks about things like knowledge generation and analysis, which we spoke about. There is now an effort towards localizing research and knowledge generation. It talks about language, I've mentioned, fundraising, I've mentioned. It talks about things like strategies, the fact that we measure our success and set our benchmarks in terms of growth parameters in the international development sector. We grew our funding by X amount. You know, I thought we were supposed to be working ourselves out of a job. You know, so there is a hypocrisy and dichotomy there. So it really, I think, in a very practical terms, unpacks a lot of these conversations that we've been talking about. So I really reference this. And just to emphasize that the conversation has moved on from localization, but also, and I'll come to this towards the end, we need to separate the language from the actions as well, because if we wait to resolve the language question before we start doing any actions, then we'll be waiting too long. So maybe from the next slide, I'll speak to Trokrah's approach. And again, apologies for rushing. So Trokrah has been, as I mentioned, we have always worked in partnership. It's now been 50 years. We say it's a core and defining aspect of who we are, and our commitment to partnership stems from the belief that development must be locally owned and driven by a vibrant local civil society and the communities they represent and work with. In that, the vibrant civil society is also an end in it, is the end in itself, and partnership is something that allows us to get there. This is just a very brass tacks diagram to give you just a sense of how the partnership works when we go about it. We start with the scoping and identification process to try and identify local organizations who have the same values and do the kind of work that aligns with what Trokrah is trying to do. We have a due diligence and vetting process about that tries to address the risk question a little bit, to see that when there are mechanisms in place to ensure that the funds are spent well. I'm glad Anne mentioned the risk topic, because this question of how we approach risk in partnerships is also evolving, and I won't go into too much. I don't have much detail on that today because it's a work in progress at Trokra. But I think just to mention that how we see risk is shifting. So there is we have our joint project design process before we start the partnership. When we start, there is an onboarding and initiation phase. There is the implementation of the project, during which Trokra's role is primarily to provide support and oversight, and also any capacity strengthening support that partners may think is necessary or needed. And then there is a periodic process of monitoring and review before the end of the project, where there's an end of cycle review, and we decide whether we want to close, continue, or renew the partnership, and accordingly decide whether we are working towards a sustainable exit, which is also an important part to think about, whether we're continuing by renewing the same agreement, or whether we're re-engaging on how we are working together in partnership. So this is just to give you a sense of what that cycle looks like. But I'll go to the next slide to speak about how this has now shifted in terms of our commitment to localization. So when this conversation started emerging in 2016 through the World Humanitarian Summit, Trokra, as an organization that has always worked in partnership, was very interested and actively engaged from the beginning. And we have gone through an internal process with support from Irish Aid to examine what localization means to us and our partners, and to put together an agenda for work. And we have then subsequently built that into our commitment in our strategic plan. So there was an internal piece of research in 2017 called More Than the Money, Localization in Practice. One of the earliest definitions of localization in the sector comes from that piece of research. And in that piece of research, we engaged with our partners from across different country offices to really try and understand what is it that they would like to see in terms of the shift. We then had the 2019 research piece on partnership in practice, which took all the insights from the earlier document to develop our own framework, because we all love a good framework. So our own framework on localization, which identified concrete action points on how we want to move this forward. And in 2021, with the support of Irish Aid, we took a step towards operationalizing these commitments more faster, I should say. So we put a commitment to the step change from partnership to localization in our strategic plan. We established a global hub on partnership and localization based in Nairobi, with one role based in the head office in Minute, which is me, to operationalize this shift. And one of the first things that the Global Hub did was develop our partnership and localization strategy, which sets out our course of action for the next 4 years. And I will just give you an insight into what some of those specific actions are, to bring the conversation a little bit into the brass tacks. We also, I won't spend much time on this. This is the definition we have eventually gone with in our strategy. It's a bit unwieldy in trying to be comprehensive. It touches upon a lot of things, but it's a bit too long to read out now, given our time. So I won't go over it, but please look at our strategy for that. And broadly, our framework aligns to these 4 outcomes. So when Trokra talks about localization, we talk about voice and influence for our partners. So supporting our partners to have increased voice and influence in key decision-making and coordination processes and spaces. Second is capacity strengthening. Capacity strengthening that is based on partners' needs, that acknowledges existing capacities, and that is also evolving into a mutual capacity sharing process. The third one is on examining our own partnership approach. So we have been doing partnership for 50 years. That doesn't mean we have been doing everything perfectly. And it is really taking a critical lens to our own partnerships to ensure that our partnerships are equitable. They have that piece of mutual accountability that, again, Christian mentioned, that everyone says but nobody does. And it has trust. And that's that outcome 3. And finally, our 4th one is on funding and resources. Again, the giant elephant that everyone talks about, which is looking at whether we are providing our partners with the sufficient quality and quantity of funding and resources, and not facing giant burdens of compliance and reporting on them as far as possible, while still maintaining a quality partnership. So, to give you some examples of the work we have done under each of the pillars, I'll just pick out 2 things under each of these pillars just to give you some examples of what this really means in practice. So under voice and influence, when we say we have supported actors, our local partners to attend and meaningfully participate in key coordination and decision-making spaces at the international, national, and local levels. This includes supporting local actors to attend COP, supporting local actors to attend the European Humanitarian Forum, supporting local actors to attend the Global Women Deliver Conference. So we have worked in the thematic areas that we work in. We have identified key moments where it is imperative for our local actors to be present and put their voices forward, and we have supported them to engage in those spaces, participate and engage in those spaces. And similarly, I mean, those are the big global examples, but similarly at local level, at district level, so much of your decision making happens at district level. So we support, one of the projects we have been working on has been supporting women-led and women-centered organizations to take on leadership roles in the GBV coordination structures at their district and cluster levels. And we have been running a project on that in Somalia and Sudan, but this is more broadly part of the agenda that RUCRA works on. Secondly, I spoke about how a lot of the conversation on localization and the agenda for localization happened without local actors. And so that's another thing that we have really aimed to influence in our work under this pillar, where we are supporting the establishment and operation of country-level mechanisms for advancing the localization agenda, where we hear from local actors and where the process is led by local actors. So Charter for Change is one of the mechanisms where we are supporting the country-level establishment of Charter for Change networks, and similarly the national reference groups, which are the country-level mechanism of the Grand Bargain, which has so far been a dialogue held without local actors to have a national voice. So I'm getting the time signal, so I'll speed through. Capacity strengthening, just to give you again 2 concrete examples. Adopting a partner-driven and harmonized approach to capacity strengthening with greater financial autonomy for local partners. So instead of saying, here, we'll come and do capacity strengthening for you, we are saying, here's some money, tell us what you would like to use it for in terms of capacity strengthening and how you're going to use it. It's their decision. It's not us imposing capacity strengthening on them. We have a capacity strengthening approach, which we have revised to say, that this is a capacity strengthening approach where you set the priorities and you set the agenda. We have also acknowledged that we are not the only actors out there who are doing capacity strengthening. So we are saying, if you have a capacity strengthening plan that you've developed with somebody else, we don't care, it's okay, you can use that plan, we will fund you to implement it. So greater coordination and greater autonomy. We are also developing and piloting a harmonized approach to due diligence assessments with other INGOs. So speaking to our peers to coordinate better, to reduce the amount of due diligence that our local and national actors have to go through. And that's currently ongoing. On partnership quality, we are trying to shift our partnerships from project-based partnerships to longer-term relationships that are aimed at supporting partners' own strategic ambitions. So it's not how they fit in with our work, it's how we fit in with theirs. And finally, mutual accountability. So we are trying to actually get the mutual accountability by having a feedback mechanism every 2 years to hear from partners to say, what are we doing well, what are we doing badly, how can we improve, and also ensuring that they are represented on various governance structures within RUCRA, so their voice influences our work as well. Funding and resources, we have now a policy that looks to share adequate indirect and core costs with partners to enable them to have greater financial and organizational resilience. And finally, we are putting our partners in touch directly with donors to see where they can access direct funding, and we don't need to be there as an intermediary. So we are trying to actively step out of that role. Last slide. Promise, and it's short. So what we have learned, there's a whole bunch of learnings, but I'll focus on 5 things for today. The demand for localization or decolonization or whatever you want to call it is here to stay, and it's only getting louder. The agenda is getting refined and evolving as we speak. I think the fundamental thing is there to say is not something that I think is going to be out of focus 5 years from now. So if you're not already acting on it, it's time to get on board. Operationalizing the shift to localization means a real reduction in funds and resources for international actors. Troca is taking a hit on its finances by implementing its core cost sharing policy, but this is the reality. This is what localization means. It means that we will have, international actors will have less, and that's something to be prepared for going into the conversation. Our role as intermediaries, as international actors, is changing, and every international organization that plays this role needs to have an existential conversation about what our added value is. We need to be very clear about what local actors are getting from us, and that's something that will be different for every organization, but that conversation needs to start happening. Localization requires international actors to cede power and space. Again, this is something just like the funding and resources, this is something we need to be clear about going into the conversation. It will mean that we are less visible, we have less prominence, and the protagonists of this story will be people who should have been the protagonists all along, because it is their story. And finally, just to emphasize, there are no easily replicable templates for operationalizing localization. I'm giving you Troca's example today, but as trite as it sounds, every organization must go on their own journey. Every organization has to examine what aspects of that conversation are relevant to you. There are different stakeholders. It is applicable in a different way to donors, to international organizations, to local and national actors, and we all need to be thinking about how we are a part of this conversation and devising our own plans to act on it. So I'll end it on that note, and maybe just with the spirit of localization. I know this looks like a large and very overwhelming task list, but there is a proverb in many Indian languages actually that I speak, which says, which goes something in my language goes like, "Tipe tipe sarovar bharai, kakre kakre par bandhai," and I don't think there's a direct equivalent in English, but it basically means every oceans are filled up by individual drops of water, and mountains are made with individual grains of sand. So let's stop trying to shake the whole mountain and working on the grains of sand that we have and that we can control. Thank you.
Super, Ruchi. What a fantastic presentation.
Sorry for flying through that.
On point. Who here feels challenged? Who here feels like you're learning? Who here feels uncomfortable with some of the things that you're involved in or have done or think or say? Who here is afraid to say some things in case it's the wrong thing? Just notice. Wonderful, Ruchi, really powerful. Thank you. Comments, questions? We have a little bit of time. Yes, Juan.
Why in those 5 initial circles you put in there, the word sustainability wasn't?
I don't think we've called it out as a separate thing, but sustainability is very much a part of the whole. I mean, we see localization as catering to that whole conversation of sustainability in itself, in that eventually we want to have a civil society where we are not needed. That is the ultimate idea of sustainability. So I don't think we've felt like it was a separate pillar that needed to be carved out, but it is an underlying thread through the whole localization work. And it's also particularly in our partnership approach when we talk about doing responsible exits out of partnerships and out of communities and countries. It features in that part of that conversation.
Thank you, Ruchi. Caragh, then Aisha.
Yeah, just in relation to funding. I'm really interested to know, I suppose, from the outside, it seems like there's a perceived risk to maybe having less compliance, less regulation in and around the funding, but in the experience of Trogra, has that materialised?
So it's interesting because I think Trogra has seen in the last, since we've been working, we've actually seen the global conversation around risk getting more stringent over the years. So we have our own mechanisms and tools. We have a minimum requirements, a list of 12 minimum requirements that we administer with our partners as part of our due diligence process. But I think what Trogra has done well is that it hasn't been too rigid about these, and Trogra has itself taken on the risk of that funding. So we have, where some of these minimum requirements are not met, Trogra works hand in hand with those partners to try and ensure they put in place those requirements, but it doesn't necessarily prohibit us from partnering with them. So we might take it slow and kind of build up a relationship, but I think that question of trust has been something that has been fundamental to at least Trogra's approach on partnership, I think, which is one of the very positive things. But there is an increasing shift towards more due diligence, more compliance, and we are finding ourselves at a time where there's a bit of a tension with what we have been, what a good trusting partnership has looked like, and what donors and other mechanisms now require in terms of compliance.
Which I was surprised not to hear you. When I worked with Trogra, we used to use the word accompaniment a lot, accompaniment instead of partnership, and I always really liked that term, but I don't see it at all here. Is it something still that Trogra is talking about, and just or not?
No, absolutely. I think it features more in, it's one of the main things we do under our capacity strengthening. When we talk about capacity strengthening, we talk about it in terms of accompaniment.
Yeah.
So it's not just trainings, but it is literally sitting in the same room with partners over days and weeks to work through the things that they might need to work through. So we very much use the terminology still, yes.
Chandler.
Yes, it's a nice approach, of course. What Trogra is doing. But my question is, I know this is great, but for how long have you been implementing this? And if any, I would want to learn the risks and the challenges that are there.
So I think we've like I said, we've been working in partnership for 50 years. Localization is a relatively new word in the space, and so we have started working on localization. Specifically, is maybe say in the last 2 years we've been working on operationalizing this shift to localization. So it's still a learning process and an ongoing process. I think there are several risks and challenges. I think we have seen our role as twofold. One is external facing and one is internal facing. In our external facing work, we try to work and influence the sector to also evolve and shift how their ways of working, and also support our partners to be more engaged in this conversation. Whereas the internal facing work is more at introspecting at how we have been doing things ourselves. And in both conversations, there are obviously spaces of resistance where not everyone is equally on board. Like the conversation of risk is one which we keep hearing over and again in terms of one of the challenges to localization as to why we shouldn't be moving forward with it. But it is that conversation is also evolving. But I think, to be honest, like in the last 2 years, we have focused on the things that we know we can get done, and we have known that they needed to be done anyway. So I think we've seen more progress and more opportunities than we have challenges. And I think now, as we enter when we're kind of going beyond our quick wins and getting in a little bit more into the weeds of things, I think those challenges will emerge. So maybe 2 years from now, I'll have a different answer.
Thanks, Ruchi. Last comment, Eunice, and I know everybody would like to come in, but remember, this is just before lunch. Right. Eunice.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I just wanted to bring in that angle of localization, because Trogra is looking at it now from, let's say, global north and global south. Is there an avenue where you have an M&E now to now do localization within those global south? So so that the people at the grassroots level also do not feel, over-organized, if there's anything like that in your plan.
Yeah, so like I said, I think that speaks to the kind of pillar on participation that is part of maybe it's again not the best language because we have been talking about participation for decades, but I think there is a question of accountability to affected populations is how it's framed again in one part of the discourse. We at Trokra, this is part of our commitment to the core humanitarian standards, so that's how it's coming into the conversation for us. But it is our emphasis in terms of the work we do on localization is on very much on the local and national organizations who we work with. These organizations are a combination of community-based organizations, national level organizations, sometimes they also have a international reach, so it's a mix, and we try to keep the mix diverse to the extent that we're continuing to work with small and community-based organizations who can more authentically represent the voices of the communities that we're serving. So I don't have a very clear-cut response for you, but hopefully that'll do.
But since I became coordinator in ESTHER Ireland, I am in no doubt of the quality of the partnerships and the impact of those partnerships, but it isn't always necessarily reflected in what we're communicating to the world, what we're showcasing and what we're putting out there. And I suppose I kind of then became more interested in this whole area of communication and what we are doing with the ESTHER partnerships because of that. And also at the same time as this, that we within the IGHN have started exploring the concept of decolonisation. And we've taken this as sort of a learning so that we ourselves are learning, and as we're going we're maybe sharing little bits and pieces here and there. So anybody that's following us on social media will have seen some posts about this, and also within our newsletter we've included a new section which we're calling Equity in Action, which is about sharing resources on decolonisation. So I wanted today to kind of maybe pull these two pieces together, this maybe not fully utilising what we have in terms of the channels for communication, the richness of what we have to communicate, and then how we're communicating it with maybe just a little bit of a thought to decolonisation. So first off, I'm just going to take a very quick look at the context of ESTHER Ireland, the context of our communications, and then look at the ethical considerations. So consent, accurate representation in context, challenging stereotypes and power symmetries, language, and then finally just a slide on a few of the resources. So first, just to maybe what could have been said first thing in the morning, but just for anybody that doesn't know, like, who are we as ESTHER Ireland? ESTHER Ireland is an initiative of the HSE. The IGHN acts as a secretariat. We get funded by Irish Aid. We are really a body that our reason for being is to support health partnerships. Now, I'm stumbling on my words here because I'm thinking of the conversations with Christian earlier and all this debate we have. And what I would normally say is health partnerships between institutions in Ireland and counterpart institutions in the global south. But in the global majority would probably be a nicer way of putting it. I'm learning as well today. And so this partnership approach really, when I take all the words out of there, the word that I focus on is inequities. What we're all trying to do here in global health, I think, really is address those health inequities. So the kind of support that ESTHER gives to these health partnerships kind of come into three main categories: technical, network and learning, and the Small Grants Fund. So I think the Small Grants Fund sort of speaks for itself. People know about that. Technical support in a range of different ways. One of them is that currently we have partnership clinics, which are very informal, online gathering where we can discuss a particular topic or theme and provide targeted technical support to our partnerships on that. In terms of networking and learning, here we are today, Partnerships Forum, nothing better than that, but also ongoing sharing resources, communicating with our partnerships. Our newsletter is a key tool in all of that as well. So our reach, ESTHER Ireland's channels are mainly the newsletter, which we have 1,000 subscribers, and you might say that's not a huge number. But I think what really I want to communicate to partnerships on this is it isn't a massive number, but when you think of it in the context of Ireland and of the ESTHER programme, it's quality, maybe not quantity. It's other health partnerships, it's other people in health institutions, it's the hospitals, it's the GP surgery in Gorey, it's, you know, it's quality, and it might be the kind of audience that you are looking for. And then also our website, we've an average of 3,000 annual visitors to our website per year, so that's really, it's not a bad number. And within that website we have information on a lot of our partnerships. It requires some updating. I'm looking forward to being involved in the process of updating that, and also hoping that partnerships will share information to be able to do that. But we have a much greater reach because of my lovely colleagues in the IGHN. We have up to 11,000 combined social media followers across Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube, and then a bigger reach then on their newsletter as well. So really when you put all that together, it's quite a big audience. And I think really what it is if we want to look at this issue of health inequality, we have to get the message right, and then we have to communicate it beyond ourselves. So health partnership communications. What I want to say here is that the content of our communications is what is important. You know, we use images, messages, and languages, and in this context, we're really portraying people in the global south, and how we portray them has a massive impact. And this is kind of, you know, the historical background, and obviously much broader than just ourselves here in this room. But you know, NGOs looking for funding and everything have historically had a particular angle on some of those communications and images. So our communications, I would propose, either challenge or maintain those systems of power. And I have an example here, and it's a very particular one that comes from MSF. And I would like, if anybody would like to maybe make a comment about it or have anything to say about this image.
White savior.
Yeah. And the mother is like pushed to the side,
Exactly.
looking on as her with her very sick child.
Yeah. And the expression of the lady there is like, oh my God, I'm gonna stay here, like, you know, like, oh you poor thing, you know, that's, I didn't know.
Yeah. So can we agree it's a very powerful image in one way. And what it actually is, I took it from a more recent campaign by MSF. And this is actually a good thing, because they highlighted that the section in black and white, it was also in black and white, which is something that you do to portray poverty, and that they actually used that previously in their ad campaign. Now I think it could have been, you know, maybe a decade or more ago. And they have since reevaluated this and acknowledged that this is promoting, you know, racist stereotypes. And they have like cropped out the parents. You can't even see the expressions of the parents, who are obviously very concerned and looking after their child. You just see this one white individual and a sick black child. So this really is just to demonstrate that it is so powerful, and that these stereotypes, it's nearly easier to reinforce a stereotype than it is to challenge it, because we have been fed them for so long. And this campaign by MSF, they said, actually, you know, we have basically more doctors who are black than we have white doctors, but we in the past have used those white faces on our media campaigns, and we're not going to do that anymore. And we have a diverse workforce. So that was just a little example. So really, in terms of the communications content, it's all about our images, our messages, our language, and what that leads to. So that content shapes people's perceptions, that influences debate, and it either challenges or maintains the structures. that really holds up this health inequity which is in existence. So then just bringing it back to your own partnerships. And so just sort of back to just looking at the basics of communications. These are just some considerations. What is it that you want to achieve through your communication? This is sort of like a first step of getting out there with messages or sharing information. Do you want to raise awareness of issues? Do you want to fundraise, promote your work? Having that clear is the foundation. Looking at who's your audience. What is your message? What do you think your message is, and are you inadvertently communicating another message? And what are the best channels to communicate those messages? Are they channels that we have in ESTHER Ireland, IGHN, or do you have your own channels? Do you want to start to have your own channels? Do you want to set up your Instagram account? They're just some thoughts on it. And this is a little bit of now an ethical checklist. I won't go through it all, but just some of the questions that you can ask that can help guide those messages. I think very central to what we've been talking about today is, are both sides of the partnership involved in the communication of the project? Is that equality there? Does the material respect the dignity of content contributors? What dynamic is the message communicating? And do we have informed consent? So just to touch on consent a little bit, I think sometimes us in the global minority like to have forms for consent, and I think we feel like once they're signed, that's it, we've ticked that box. And I've worked in a previous role where I had to gain consent of participants, and even in an Irish context, I find it very tricky, because sometimes I might get an uncomfortable feeling. Is this person really, really understanding what I'm asking them? And that is with somebody of my own culture, my own language. So that's just the beginning of how complex that whole piece around consent is. And that power dynamic, that identity that I have bringing to a situation would quite often leave someone in a position where they don't feel they could say no. So possibly an alternative way of looking at it is taking time to establish a rapport with somebody, and through that dialogue you're going a little bit more towards that meaningful consent. Also important is ensuring that those that we are photographing or writing about understand where and how the material will be used, and whether or not participants wish to be named. So then, in order to not fall into stereotypes, in order to open up that dialogue, and we really want to show as much as possible of the context and accurately represent people or situations, allowing for people to choose their own story. What is it they want told? And to actually tell that story it can be quite powerful. Always providing that broader context of situations beyond the immediate challenges. For example, maybe thinking of that child in the previous photograph, the child was vulnerable in that photograph, but providing that context of the background of what is happening, we can maybe switch it around. There is a situation that is creating that vulnerability. There is exclusion there. That child is excluded perhaps from, accessing health, from whatever it is. So it's the situation, and not merely shaming the individual as to being vulnerable or to being poor or to what it is. So maybe just that context, I feel, can really open things up and change the impression that we are giving, give a different perception of things. So this is part of our IGHN sharing of material, and this is really powerful. So some of you will be familiar with this author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Perhaps, I hope I pronounced it vaguely correctly. And her TED talk, The Danger of a Single Story. So I'll just read this here. If you show a people as one thing over and over again, this is what they become. If all we see is how poor people are, it becomes impossible to imagine them as anything else. Their poverty becomes the single story. The single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. It's, if you have to, look up that TED talk. It's really, it's very powerful. So, to avoid reinforcing stereotypes and power asymmetries, we can portray diverse voices and perspectives in our communications. We can show the equality in our partnerships. And this is something, I suppose, that I get to see from the material maybe that people do share, or the reports that we get. There can be more of a focus in terms of a narrative of the learning that the northern or the minority brought to the southern partner. And that, I understand, is the focus of the work, but thinking of what we've heard here today, I understand that the statistics, I can't repeat them, but at the beginning of the presentation was about the number of doctors, the population of the country. You know, it's astounding. It's really astounding. And don't try to tell me that an Irish doctor can't learn from just how incredible it is for somebody to keep working in those contexts, in those resource-poor contexts. And it's going to be a different way of learning, and how much learning there's going to be for us here and our health system. And sometimes we just forget to reflect on that, and that isn't always reflected back to us in the reports. And the other side of it is then there's also nuances to it, that, you know, when we are receiving a photograph of maybe a visit from the Irish partner to the southern partner, who's being showcased doing the work at that moment in time? Is it the northern partner showing the southern partner how to do something? Or is it the northern partner learning from the southern partner? And sometimes it's just how we caption a photograph can change everything. And you know, both things are happening, and that's the thing about the ESTHER partnerships. They're really good quality partnerships. You know, there's you know, so much equality in many of them, and it's really just being careful how we portray it in images and messages, because we jump quicker to that stereotype than challenging that stereotype. And then just a final word on languages switch. Christian, you don't have to say anything. I have learned from my ways. I was suggesting third world, first world, developing countries, developed countries could better be said global north, global south, but we have even better today with global majority and global minority. And then local language, local people, it's more appropriate to really name the country, name the people, be specific, give the specifics of it. Vulnerable people, vulnerable women, we touched on that, really people facing exclusion rather than labeling the person. So in conclusion, what I really hope I have communicated is, as ESTHER Ireland, we are here to support your partnerships and to communicate the impact of your work. And that impact is just massive. David will talk about the evaluation, but somewhere in there was a line which says the work of these partnerships is extraordinary, or I'm kind of paraphrasing it there somewhere, but it's such a wealth of achievement and impact, and it would be great to be able to communicate that more fully. And then the power of communications, when it is well done, it is a powerful tool, and it is another kind of way that we can work towards health equity. Finally then, this is just some of the resources that I think are useful. Inclusive Language Guide from Oxfam is something that we've used in the office, and we've taken it as opening up the conversation. We might not necessarily agree with everything in there, but it gives us a new perspective, and we can discuss about different language suggestions. And also then, DOCUS recently revised and went through a process of revision of the Guide to Ethical Communications, and that is a really great resource. And finally then, as I mentioned earlier, the both newsletters, ESTHER Ireland and IGHN newsletters, have now a section where we're looking at issues relating to decolonisation and sharing of resources and sharing the learning as we are learning as well. So that's it.
Having such interesting discussions, I hope I don't lower the tone with talking about evaluation findings. But we have been during an evaluation process, and I think this is a learning event, so it's relevant. And some of you last year were part of this process. We had some focus groups, so it was quite important to feed something back to you. And also, of course, when we do an evaluation, it's going to inform what we do ourselves in the ESTHER program, what we do with you as partnerships. So, I mean, from the very beginning of the ESTHER Alliance, Ireland joined the ESTHER Alliance in 2013, and it's always been a question for us is about how are partnerships effective? How are they effective? What makes them effective? And what's the evidence for it? And over the years, through the ESTHER Alliance, we've done a number of evaluations. And this work, more recently, focuses on our own work in Ireland. Thank you. So the evaluation that we're talking about, it follows one we'd actually a previous one that was done in 2021, which was assessing the effectiveness of ESTHER Ireland. So that was all that we do in ESTHER Ireland, not just giving grants, but all the different activities. And overall, it came out with positive findings. It was mainly consulting with people like yourselves, among the people from the partnerships. And so among the findings were that ESTHER Ireland was fundamental to the success of partnerships, and this was attributed to many different activities, not just to grants. It identified clear value for money and highlighting the need for greater resources. But it did also highlight that there was insufficient data with regard to evidence of impact and effectiveness. And that certainly caused to reflect, because that's always been a question, how do you show the evidence that these partnerships work? We're very convinced about it, and we've lots of data around quality of partnerships. So what about impact and effectiveness? And over the years with the ESTHER Alliance, and we've led a lot of this work, we've looked at different levels of evaluation. So obviously, if in a partnership you're doing activities and projects, and they're evaluated like any project using typical project management and modeling evaluation tools. And then also we look at evaluation of the partnership. And we have a standard for that, and that's the ESTHER Charter for Quality of Partnership. And so we use that as a way of assessing quality of partnership. And then we're also interested in evaluating the impact of the whole partnership approach. What's the added value of doing the work through a partnership? So if you're doing an HIV project, you can do it another way. What's the particular benefit? What's the lasting benefit of the partnership approach? And we work to develop an assessment tool for that, which many of you are familiar with, called the Effect tool. And most of what we focus on in the ESTHER program is the bottom two. It's the quality of the partnership and the partnership approach. And that's really quite deliberate, because we've not seen it as our role to monitor what the partnerships do. We obviously need to monitor, for giving grants, the grant process. But that's your role in the partnerships. You will want to monitor and evaluate your own work, and that's your responsibility. And we're also conscious of not putting added burdens on partnerships. And I don't know, was one of you in this room may be responsible for this quote, but the grants process being excessively cumbersome. And we've certainly come in for criticism over the years of being, let's say, very rigorous in our assessment of grants. And I think maybe for the size of the grants, maybe asking a little bit too much of people. And so to be asking for more, to get more information on what you're doing and the results, where we've been uneasy about really putting more demand. So that's sort of there as well. And our intentional focus has been on the quality partnership, because the evidence is there that high quality partnerships are successful, that they're effective, that they deliver results. And we've been part of building the evidence for that. And that's built into our processes, into the small grants process, into the effect tool, into the accreditation of partnerships. And then, but reflecting on this gap in information that we'd like to have, we realized, well, we actually have a huge amount of documentation about the partnerships through the grants program. Every application, everybody who gets a grant has to write a report. That's a big body of data. So we did then a further evaluation, a further stage of the evaluation, which was to analyze the effectiveness of the grants awarded using mainly that data and some additional data as well. So we want to assess the achievements resulting from the ESTHER grants. That's the particular focus, so it's not looking at everything. And notably, it's also not looking at some of the partnerships that are not supported by ESTHER grants. So for instance, the large HSE partnerships with different countries in Africa, that wasn't part of this review. And this was looking over the period 2014 to 2021, 50 grants, and it was over 400,000 of grants. But we had the same consultant, Andrew Jones, to do this work as a previous one, and Andrew was a very good person to do this because he managed the grants program for PET in the UK, which was funded by the UK government, their £30 million funded program. So I just say 30 million just by way of a small kind of contrast with our own resources. And so that study was kind of in a number of different phases, and we were fortunate also to have the assistance of some students from the University of Limerick just to work with us for a couple of months. We were able to do some of the analysis. So it was a lot of work, a lot of qualitative analysis. And again, it came up exactly as the last time, that still that a lot of the results were, there was mainly narrative, that there was not a lot of quantitative data, and it was quite hard to really come out with strong evidence of the impact of the grants because of that, and that the documents tended to be limited to listing the activities. So I'll just talk briefly about a few of the findings. And these were similar to the previous part of the evaluation. They did highlight about the effectiveness of the partnership model. So we didn't feel we have to kind of prove that. There's a lot of evidence being built up that the health partnership model is a very successful approach to development cooperation, and that it can be more effective than a lot of traditional development approaches like technical assistance. And among the findings were that the achievements were really quite significant, particularly given the small amounts of funding involved. There was a rich diversity of activities within the partnership projects funded through ESTHER that have had impact at a local, district and national level, so many different levels. And the report acknowledges that some individual grants achieved a disproportionately large impact considering the grant size, and others reported numerous achievements. So really very positive findings about what was achieved, and saw others expanding their activities well beyond initial ambitions. The report also highlighted that the ESTHER funding was quite significant and sometimes been the catalyst or the means for some of these partnerships to develop, and without which they might not have got to where they got. They often had other sources of funding, and sometimes very significant funding, but that the ESTHER program played a role in helping them start up and also in leveraging additional funding. So the grants received through ESTHER Ireland have been said by some anyway, the most important contribution to the establishment and continuation of partnerships and their activities. Support given by ESTHER Ireland staff and the effect tool were also highlighted positively. Findings point to positive results associated with characteristics of quality partnerships. The most commonly mentioned success factor was the establishment of good relationships. So we've talked about some of that today. Other factors include regular, clear communication, shared values, understanding of cultural setting of each partner, institutional commitment. I think you won't be surprised at those findings. And then looking at the strengthening of the Irish Health Service, we were quite keen also to see what could we gather information on how the partnerships were impacting on services in Ireland. What was the reciprocal benefit from the time we were back in Ireland? And the report highlighted that the majority of partnerships have not focused on this to date. So that's an area clear for us to reflect on and to think about what we might do in response to that. I think we've heard some of the partnerships today, some of the benefits back in Ireland, but typically the partnerships start with the focus being on the need in the partner country rather than the needs here. And we haven't maybe been as intentional as bringing that into the partnerships and seeing how to optimize it. And then of those that have done focused on this, on the benefits in the Irish system, the benefits include involvement of local community, learning around better utilisation of limited resources, interdisciplinary approach, breaking down of hierarchical barriers in clinical settings, and gaining valuable clinical experience. And I think most people will talk about these things when you ask them how they benefit from the partnership. So I think in response to this, one of the immediate things we wanted to address was this issue of data, and could we improve through this process without adding burden to applicants for grants on improving the data that would help us better understand the effectiveness and impact of the partnerships. And so we reviewed this year, and then this was then reflected in the new grant round, and some of you will have seen this who were part of it, that we tried to build this into the new process. We actually shortened the application form, so not to make it more onerous, but we did introduce some more specific questions on benefits to the Irish health system and stronger emphasis on monitoring and evaluation at the different stages, including clear expressions of goal, outcomes and outputs with smart indicators. Now, we'd be hoping that that's a benefit, not just to ourselves because we get data, but also people to applying to really do good planning, good project planning, because part of good project planning is to look at these things. And sometimes at the beginning is to collect good data around the baseline, because that will then allow you to measure results later. So having introduced this now with the latest round of grants, we'd be very interested to just get feedback and see how that has worked. So the other, I don't come too many other things, but just to touch on the area of funding, and it does come up in the different reports about the need for additional funding, or the value, if there is additional funding, what can be achieved. And in the first report, one of the interesting things that came up was that not everybody was unhappy with the small amounts of funding. And it did strike me that there is a positive thing in not having a lot of funding, and funding came up as one of the big issues in partnerships and in hard alliance and so on. But when we in HSE go into a country, initiate a partnership, we're very clear when we go in and talk and have discussions with our partners that we don't have money. We say, we're here, we're very happy to have technical cooperation and share technical knowledge and so on, but we're not a donor, we don't have money. And that can actually be very, very useful in the discussions at the beginning when we're not seen as a donor, a traditional donor, and discussions are all around what's the money going to be for. And you find that people often then, it connects with the right people, the people who really want to make a change, a positive change in the health service or in health, without kind of just being to do with money. So, and that really is the idea of these small grants. It's not about what you do with the project you do, it's more about getting the partnership established. And they are very small grants. And there is a positive in that, and I've been part of a lot of the other European ESTHER programs, and I was on the steering group for ESTHER Switzerland, and I've seen a lot of their applications, and they're for much bigger size of money, 100,000, 200,000, more sometimes. And it's about the project often more than the partnership. Of course, what they do is they have a project, and then they'll set up a partnership to do the project. But it's all about the project. Whereas I think that because we have done with that money, we don't fall into that trap or go down that road to the same way, because it is all about the partnership. And we're very convinced that if you get the partnership right, the rest will follow. But one thing we've seen is partnerships go on over a few years. They might start small, but then there's the opportunity to do something more ambitious. And I think the Gorey Malawi Health Partnership is a good example. I mean, they've done a lot of things, starting small and building up. But they've got some ambitious ideas around training that could have very big impact in the country. Training in general practice and clinical officers and so on, and pharmacists. I mean, this could be very big impact. But you won't do that on a 10,000 ESTHER grant. And so, while we can do a lot with small grants, we are keen to see if there are opportunities to get more funding for significant work within partnerships. And we're trying that out. And one of the things we did this year is we introduced a new band 3 grants, we call them, which is through the HSE Global Health Program, which is allowing us to target some particular partnerships that are in the countries where we're working, so in a sense it can be part of our program, where we can give them some additional funding for very significant projects, and particularly those where it's to do with strengthening health systems, maybe strengthening key national health institutions. So one example is in Tanzania, is the Tanzania Blood Transfusion Service. Very key national service is now in partnership with the Irish Blood Transfusion Service. Another example, which I can't think right now. Pardon?
The obstetric training.
Yeah, that's the obstetrics, very similar to a bit along the lines of the very successful RCSI COSEXA partnership. Now the Institute of Obstetrics in the Royal College of Physicians is seeking to develop collaboration with the ESTHER and Southern African College for Obstetrics and Gynecology. Potentially very significant. Now that will require more resources, but it gives that opportunity to channel more resources into key initiatives. So we're very interested in that. So I'm very interested to engage you around ideas of, if we get more funding, how best to use it. And as we take forward the results from the evaluation, that will feed into how we plan for the future. We'll be thinking of how we might continue. I think we want to continue to catalyze new partnerships. When I was in Ethiopia recently, I see a couple of new partnerships starting up. It's good to have supports for those. But are there then ways to put more significant funding into some of the very important partnerships that some of you are involved in? So, yeah, so that's on funding. And then in terms of the Irish Health Services, I think this is really important for us to really be, in a very deliberate way, look at how we can look at the mutual benefits and start bringing more of the benefits back in. And our CEO, who was at the signing, who signed the agreement, HSE agreement with Royal College of Physicians for the Equals initiative recently, commented on how much we can learn from Zambia. And I think it's true that it's not just what we learn because we're involved and bring back, that's one part of the learning. But if we could more institutionally capture learning and bring it in a more deliberate way into our health service. And I don't know how to do that. We bring people over and get people to talk to our senior staff. Are they open to it? Somebody said it would require a change of mindset on our side to be very open to that. But I think there's opportunities there. I think there's an enormous amount of that we can learn in Ireland from the partners we work with. And we're very keen to see how to do that. So yeah, so we'll be using this report to inform the next stage of our planning, and we're very interested to engage with you on that. And we will be having Andrew Jones, who conducts the evaluation, over to meet with us and to help us with our planning. You'll no doubt hear from us about how things are going. But we're very keen to grow the partnership program, and I think we're very convinced of the success of it, I think, from all we're seeing, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. So that's all about that. I'd like to pause there and see if any of you want to ask any questions or make any comments on that. I think I want to. I have a nice little job now to do accreditation. And you know.
Explain what accreditation.
No, yeah, no, I'm going to do that. Yes, thank you for reminding me that. Definitely. Yeah, no, I think we've heard that, like, the ESTHER Ireland is all about different ways in which we try and promote and incentivize and support good quality partnerships. And we do that through the small grants. We do it through learning events like this. And another way we do it is through accreditation. And what accreditation is a way of recognizing partnerships that are committed to and adhere to standards of quality of partnership. And we have within the ESTHER Alliance, that was established by the ESTHER Alliance, is a charter for quality of partnership. So that gives a standard of 8 kind of principles of good partnership. And that if partnerships adhere to those, then we like to recognize that. And partners then, I think, appreciate that recognition. And I might ask, there's a couple that come up that they might just say what they appreciate and what it means for them. So what we have is an accreditation. Before we did it by doing a kind of like an audit process. Now it's an online process whereby if a partnership would like to apply for accreditation through the ESTHER Ireland website, they can apply, and then if that's accepted or approved, then we award them accreditation, and then we re-award re-accreditation after 5 years. So I'm delighted today that we have 2 partnerships that are approved for re-accreditation, and we'd like to award them with a plaque to recognise that. And the first is the Gorey, Malawi Health Partnership. And we have 2 plaques, one for each of the partners. And is there someone who would like to come up to Jesse's and
We need a representative from the Irish part and a representative from the Malawi part.
Congratulations. Could I ask maybe if either of you like to suggest what does accreditation mean and what's the value?
I think it's a very useful tool for us to look at why we're still doing it. So I think it's one of the key parts for us to sit down and inform us of why are we still trying to be partners, why are we still working at this, and to look at maybe where we're not maybe doing as well and things we can look at. Because otherwise it gets so busy, I think, you're trying to run your day job and do everything else and read everything, and you get a chance to actually answer why we're doing it. So I think that's what I certainly find very useful.
Yeah, I think I was saying like we were doing in our group, start, stop, and continue.
Thanks very much.
I'd like to answer the second partnership is the Eden Park Medical and Standing Voices in Malawi. David, congratulations. And we might we have just one for you on behalf of both.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that we don't have the the Malawi partner here with us today. So there's a note I've made on my thing that we need to try and visas notwithstanding, we need to try and get our Malawi colleagues to come to our meetings and to show our partnership in action here. But yeah, thank you very much.
And why did you apply for this?
Well, I think for us, I mean, as Carol says, it was the catalyst that allowed us to start our work. And I think also, I mean, I don't get to these meetings very often, but I think when Carol comes back from them, there's often a lot of learning from these fora where we challenge ourselves. And I mean, that whole thing today about language and about how we present ourselves and how we present our work and all that sort of stuff. So, and as Joe alluded to, the busyness of life, but I mean, it's important to just come and spend some time just thinking about not just what we do, but how we do it. And I think thank you to you for that.
Thank you. I know that those are 2 very high quality partnerships. I think that, and I got really was asking the question really just to maybe others of you who might be interested and to apply. And it's not about it's not credit to Esther. It's really just to really acknowledge to recognise and understand what are the principles of good partnership and to reflect on them and then to have that recognised. And sometimes that can be useful just, if you're looking for funding, it might be useful just to be able to say to Irish aid others, we have that accreditation. And I think with that, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, David. So of course then we're coming full circle from this morning, and who feels like you've been through like a very, very long and yet invigorating process of just one day? Christian, you started us off. You said months.
It's been a month.
Come and preach to us some more.
We need preaching.
You need preaching.
Ah, yes.
All right. Well, what a wonderful day. And, the people who are right now in New York City at the UN General Assembly have missed out on a lot. Yeah. Because They're over there. I think some of them just, when do we finish? One of the things that this is just so valuable, so meaningful, what we've done today. I think just from my observations, body language, the smiles, all the laughter, even the uncomfortable laughter has been so full of meaning. How would I sum it up? In 3 buckets. The first one is on space. Just giving other human beings just their space to grow and their space to be the best they can be. Their space to evolve into that best version of themselves. I think that one comes into all the discussions on decolonization, all the discussions on storying people and not just putting them in a straitjacket. That is the space dimension. There's a lot more that we could say there, but I see we're almost at 4. The next part is a temporal aspect. It's come up over and over again. The need for long-term, partnerships, so that now a relationship can actually grow. Because you can start with that legal document and a signature and all, but what then leads to what we are seeing here between the Malawians and the Irish? You can tell that they are friends and that they've pretty much almost become family. That is time. So that temporal aspect, I think that one that was made very clear today. But even in our one day, I think we've seen what purposeful time can do for us. In one day, I wasn't joking when I said it feels like a month because of everything that has happened here today. That time and just pausing to take in the land. And the final bucket, the third one, is on creativity. Again, pulling in this issue of how narrative, identity, and power, how they relate to each other. And the notion of agency. We need to challenge that notion that you can empower somebody else who gave you that license. What you can do is give them the space to grow and the space to be who they are. That takes creativity. Because unfortunately, in all of the development things we always talk about, we are empowering the community, empowering, no, those are agents of their own story. So the best you can do is provide a space, or at least to be a supporter and a accomplice or an ally, in that becoming of the person. So that is that creative side of things. And next thing is to think of the issue of relevance. I mean, this one also takes creativity, relevant. You can make yourself so irrelevant when you keep on putting red tape, in, say, the grant applications or in how you communicate. You can make yourself irrelevant very quickly. So the creativity will allow you to reimagine how you engage with your partners, how you become a better partner, and also those kinds of things we think cannot change, right? We already thought that we couldn't do work remotely. COVID taught us differently, right? All of a sudden people are having 2 Zoom calls a week. Who could have thought of that beforehand? Again, it took some pushing, but again, creativity, we can get there willingly. All the aid agencies, they all say the same thing. Our process has to be this way. And you say, well, what if we were not around? You would not be relevant anymore. You would have to shut down your aid agency, right? Because typically we hear the story the other way around, right? That we have to do this extraneous, process because we have the money. Let's be honest. That's the implication. Because we have the money. I said, well, what if we are not here? Whom will you give that money to? All right? There's a reason, right? That there's an aid agency because we're on the other side. So reducing it to money and all that doesn't help. The creative thinking, creative approach, creative interaction allows now for the humility to set in, allows for the humanization to set in. And if you have those 3 buckets, time, space, creativity in a place, maybe we can actually get to those equitable partnerships we've been really searching for. That's what I've observed today. And for me, I would like to say thank you to our organizers, I'm leaving here with a very full heart. I didn't share with you, but on July 16th of this year, I came very close to death. I was involved in a crazy car accident, and the driver to this day still has brain bleeds. I got out of that car after it rolled 4 times without a scratch. Not even his glasses had a scratch. So for me, it became very, very clear that I was given a second chance to, again, do something with my life. And this is what my life's about, trading really softly through others' lives in this work of partnership. So thank you very much for everything you've done here today. As I say, my heart is full and just has so much positivity for everyone here.
As we say in Ireland, Christian, volley that. Volley that. Thank you for sharing, Christian. That was really powerful. And one thing that I'm taking away, you mentioned your glasses earlier today, about putting on glasses so that you can see, and just having heard that as well, I think all of us could go away and take Christian glasses with us. Take your glasses with us as we move, so thank you. Just to say thank you to each and every one of you for just freeing up the time. Thanks for trusting this process. Thanks for being uncomfortable. Thank you for trusting discomfort. We want to say thank you to the team here who are so humble behind the scenes and yet so powerful. Like you said, the most powerful people are the quietest people. So Caragh, Nor, Maisie, Ashika, can you stand up? Thora, Kira, could you stand up please, all of you?